Good afternoon. I want to thank everyone for coming to this very important meeting of the City Council as we do the people's work. At this time, council members, would you please stand for the invocation which will be given by Reverend Joe Kalis from Monumental United Methodist Church. Then please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor, good afternoon.
I have prayed about what to pray for tonight. I find I am leaning on the prophet Jeremiah when he tells us that when we pray for the welfare of the city, we are praying for our own welfare. I suspect if each one of us prayed to the Lord for what each of us wanted, the Lord would have to sort through 5,000 distinct and contradictory prayers. I offer my prayer, and if you would be in agreement with my prayer, then I invite you to say the word of ancient prayerful agreement, Amen. Hear my prayer. Holy One, I come before you for my city and our leaders in this hour of profound challenges and difficult choices. I confess that many of us are weary and worn from a political process too often marked by discord than by grace. Holy One, I pray that you remind us of our power to work for the greater good of our city. To that end, I pray that you will banish from us pettiness, rivalry, speaking ill of one another, seeking to serve ourselves rather than the welfare of our city. I give thanks for the people of Portsmouth, for those who serve, for those who protect, for those who teach, and for those who strive for a better day. I pray for all those who govern and are entrusted with the holy calling of public service. Keep them pure in heart and honorable in word and deed. Holy One, bless the work that is before this City Council tonight. Make every decision and every conversation, may it be done with generosity of spirit. Remind us of the truth that the prophet Jeremiah spoke. In the welfare of the city, we will find our own welfare. In all we do, in all we say, may we seek the welfare of this city. We know you by many names, Holy One. I pray in the powerful name of the one who I know as the way, the truth, and the life. And let the people say, either silently or aloud, Amen.
Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Pastor, before you make your way out, I want to first of all thank you. And last week was National Music Week, and as we did last year, the Portsmouth Music Club celebrated at your church. I think it was at 3 o'clock. Thank you for hosting that, and thank you for all of the things that Monumental does in the city and for all of the people.
Thank you, sir. I am meeting with one of our citizens this night. I would stay and be with you all, but you are very much in my prayers.
You're missing a treat. Good night, sir. Council members, would you please indicate your presence electronically? Thank you.
7 members of City Council are present.
Council members, you have before your consideration the minutes of a call meeting of April 27th, 2015, a call meeting of April 28th, 2015, and a regular meeting of April 28th, 2015, and a call meeting of May 5th, 2015. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
Move adoption.
Second.
I have a correction. Yes.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, sir. The general meeting of April 28th, I believe, was adjourned at 10:30 p.m., not a.m.
Amen. Yeah, don't we know that? Right?
I don't want the history books to reflect that wrong.
All right. Any other corrections? If not, we'll entertain a motion to accept that with that one correction. Right.
Mayor, we have a motion and a second, and you all will be voting electronically. The minutes are adopted with the correction, 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, City Council rules require a limit of up to 5 minutes to speak. As you approach the speaker's podium, you will notice a timer. At the beginning of your 5 minutes, you will see a green light. 4 minutes into your remarks, you will notice a yellow light. At the end of 5 minutes, you will see a red light, hear a beep, and we ask that you please conclude your remarks at that time. While speakers have an opportunity to address council on matters of public concern, all comments should be made in a manner that respects the seriousness of the forum and should not be made in a belligerent, sarcastic, or demeaning fashion. A speaker who fails to observe this basic rule of decorum will be deemed out of order and not allowed to conclude his or her comments. Public hearing, 15-196. Public hearing on a code amendment, use permit, and street name change applications. Item A, CA 1501, citywide. Proposed amendments to Chapter 14 of the Code of the City of Portsmouth pertaining to flood protection. The proposed amendments modify references to the latest flood insurance rate maps to become effective in June 2015. These maps include an increase in the base flood elevation based on an in-depth series of studies by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The amendments will also mention sea level rise for the first time. Other changes include adding a coastal A zone and limits of moderate wave action, proposes a freeboard of 3 feet above the BFE, designates a floodplain administrator, and modifies other provisions recommended or required to maintain eligibility under the National Flood Insurance Program. Vision Principle, a robust economy for working men and women. Electronic roll call, and I do have a speaker. And Ms. Pittenger is gonna present.
Thank you, Ms. White. Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Mr. Godfrey, members of City Council. I'm Meg Pittenger. I'm with the Department of Neighborhood Advancement. I'm the Environmental Manager. And as Ms. White read, I'm here tonight to talk about the updated floodplain management ordinance and the flood insurance rate maps.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. So what are the changes? The changes are the flood insurance rate maps, also known as the FIRMS, flood insurance rate map. The new floodplain regulations, which is the ordinance that covers developing and what things happen in the floodplain. And then the floodplain management plan we've been working on with the task force that you appointed back in October, and we'll be bringing that back in the next few months. So the bottom line is that new flood data means a safer community. FEMA has been working on a series of studies to redo the flood data for the entire East Coast in Region 3, which goes from Pennsylvania to Virginia. After Hurricane Sandy, after Katrina, they realized that the maps were really not adequate for what's going on. So they did a lot more modeling studies with the Corps of Engineers. And the bottom line is that everybody is going to have better data. Better data, you can make better decisions, and ultimately everybody can be safer. Flood zones shown on the map. There's different zones. There's X, which is the minimal risk zone, all the way up to the V zone, which is where the waves are for velocity. These are shown on the map. There's different levels of risk, and the different area that you're in is going to correspond to what your flood insurance rate will be, hence the name flood insurance rate maps. The LMWA, the limit of moderate wave action, and the coastal A zone, those are new features from FEMA for the first time on the map. And that's the limit of moderate wave action area is an area where the waves are between 3 feet and 1.5 feet. Above 3 feet, you get into the V zone. So the process to update the firms, it's a long process, which is good because it's not just a split-second decision. They did a lot of studies. They've started in 2011, and all the way up until now, where the maps will be effective on August 3rd, 2015. We got our letter of final determination, which is an official letter from FEMA that goes to the administrator of the locality that says that all the appeals have been heard, the map data is finalized, and the city has to adopt the maps within 6 months of that date, which will be August 3rd, 2015, or the city gets kicked out of the NFIP, and all of the flood insurance policies in the city get canceled if that occurs. So we don't want to even come close to that happening. Updating the floodplain ordinance is sort of the same, it's a similar process, and we're again at this same point. We need to adopt new regulations that meet with the NFIP regulations, the federal regulations, in order to remain in the floodplain management program. Otherwise, again, we won't be able to be in the NFIP. So our responsibility, the community's responsibilities, are to review the maps. We did that. We submitted a change, and FEMA accepted that, and they finalized that. We had outreach. You may remember we had a meeting back in July at Bidawee and had a lot of people come out and talk to us about maps. We've been sending out Facebook posts, Twitter, email blasts, postcards, brochures, people coming in, going and talking to civic groups. Whatever we can do to get the information out, we've been doing that. We'll continue to do that. And updating the ordinance. And again, that's one of the reasons why we're here tonight. So the major changes in the ordinance that you'll see, first thing is sea level rise. This is the first time that we're including sea level rise in the ordinance. Sea level rise is a big deal in this area particularly. It's the Mid-Atlantic area is the second highest area in the country for sea level rise, second only to New Orleans. We are ground zero for it. And the maps don't include sea level rise. So we want to include it in the ordinance so that people are aware of it, because that influences how high the water is going to go. A text change, the 100-year flood text has been taken out of the ordinance. This is in line with the state model ordinance. 100-year flood seemed to confuse people. So what the terminology is 1% annual chance flood zone. It's the same zone, it's just called something different. And as I said, the coastal A zone and the LIMWA are new items in the ordinance. So we talked about sea level rise. VIMS has done some studies, and they have this chart that shows the Sewell's Point tide gauge, which has been operating continuously since 1930. It's one of the most accurate and long-running gauges in the country. As you can see on there, the black squiggly lines, that's the water going up, and there is no going down in the trend. And what they have recommended for planning purposes is that we use the intermediate line there. And as you can see, by 2030, they're projecting another foot of sea level rise. By 2050, 1.5 feet. And by the end of the century, maybe 4 feet. And the recent data that they have found since this is actually that they project that it's probably going to be a little bit higher than this. It's definitely probably not going to be lower. So the intermediate level is where we want to use for planning. The other major change in the ordinance is freeboard. We have freeboard in the ordinance now. It's 1.5 feet. Freeboard is a margin of safety. You know, they do the maps, they do the studies based on what they think is going to happen, and it sets a level. But freeboard gives you safety above that in case there are factors that you don't know about. I always tell people the water doesn't know where the line on the map is. The water doesn't know. So if it's a full moon, a high tide, winds coming from the north for a week, the water's going to be higher than what they thought. You know, we see that already. And the maps also don't include precipitation. And as I said, the maps don't include sea level rise. So freeboard gives you that extra margin of safety. It also lowers the citizens' flood insurance premiums. If they can get above that base flood elevation, they're going to have a lower level of their flood insurance premium. So we're recommending 3 feet of freeboard above the BFE. And as you can see, that's in line with what other cities and localities around here have already adopted just recently. Hampton, Norfolk, Poquoson, York County, they all have very similar hydrology to us. They have similar coastlines, similar situations. But even Virginia Beach and Chesapeake would have, you know, they have sort of a different floodplain than we do. But they've even gone up to 2 feet. So it's the wave of the future. It's only going up. We don't, as you saw in the chart, we don't see the sea level going down. We also have land subsidence in this area where the land is actually going down in addition. So the relative sea level rise is actually more here than the global sea level rise that you may see in some other places. And in Norfolk and Hampton, they're actually starting to regulate outside the special flood hazard area. We thought that maybe that was a step too far at this point, but that, again, that's probably where things are going in the future. And people will say, well, freeboard costs money. Well, sure, you know, to elevate, it's going to cost some money. You know, I'm not a builder, but obviously it's going to cost some money. But FEMA has put out this document, Build Back Stronger. First of all, it makes people safer, number one. Helps them recover faster by not having that water. But in the flood insurance premiums alone, never mind anything else, you're going to save money if you can raise that house and get it above the base flood elevation. Bottom line, you're going to save money. If you're below the base flood elevation, you're going to pay a lot of money for flood insurance. And all you got to do is walk around the community and you can talk to people about how expensive their flood insurance is. If you can raise that house up and get it up, you're going to save money. That's the bottom line. And that, you know, and the rates are set by the federal government. It's not something that the state or the local can have anything to do with. So again, to get the information out there, we've created some pages on the city's flood website. People can get flood maps. They can get, you know, the regulations for building. They can, you know, get information about, you know, what the regulations are. Our contact information is on there. And we also created, which is linked on the website, some flood map viewers. These are available 24 hours a day. Anybody with a computer, even a cell phone or an iPad, can go on and look at the flood maps 24 hours a day. If you're on a computer, you can print it out. It's scaled. It shows the zones. People can call us. We'll walk them through. If they come in, we'll print it out for them. So we want to make the information, we want to make it easy for people to be able to get the information of what flood zone they're in so they can make good choices about what that is. I get, you know, 3 to 5 people call me every week saying, I want to check on this property and see what flood zone I'm in. And we pull it up and we print it out and we help them out with that. So the next steps are that we have to submit the adopted ordinance to the state NFIP coordinator. We already submitted it to him for a preliminary review and he approved it. We have to submit it back to him. He'll approve it, he'll look it over just to make sure it's still okay, and then he'll send it to FEMA for approval and they'll have to approve it. And then the firm, the flood insurance study, and the floodplain management regulations will go into effect on August 3rd, 2015. So with that, are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Meg. Any questions for? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Our speaker is Mr. Joshua Clark. No, ma'am, please have a seat.
There's a lot of murders going around.
Ma'am.
And my nephew just got killed. My brother got
So you need
killed
to
2
get her.
years ago. Y'all can put me out, but I want to be heard. Because Portsmouth, I have no help around here. I have 2 family members that's laying down, that's dead right now, and nobody's doing nothing about it. So I want to know now, and I want answers now, and not next year about my nephew. I want answers now. And I'm telling you, I want answers now, and I want answers now. Police, all y'all want to do is talk about tent, drugs, unnecessary stuff. Do y'all job. Run this city. Run the city. Don't touch me. Please don't touch me. Y'all, did y'all touch the person that killed my nephew? Did y'all touch the person that killed my brother 2 years ago? My brother died 2 years ago. Nobody did anything. Kenny Wright, let's show people Kenny Wright. Kenny Wright, let's show people. Did you do anything about it, Kenny Wright? No. You ain't did nothing about it, Kenny Wright.
Mr. Clark.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of Portsmouth City Council. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak today. My name is Joshua Clark. My address is 2117 Smith Avenue, Chesapeake, Virginia. I represent the Tidewater Builders Association. We're made up of a collection of businesses and builders, about 700 of them, many of which live and work right here in the city of Portsmouth. You received a letter from me today. Thank everyone for reading that. I'm sorry it came so late in the evening, or late in the afternoon. I appreciate that, though. It highlighted some of the concerns TBA had with the new floodplain ordinances that's proposed today. I'd like to highlight some specific points of clarification since you've already read the letter, instead of going over the details of it. First of all, I do want to say that we do support redrawing the flood insurance rate maps. You definitely need to redraw those or to adopt those in order to stay current with the community rating system. Other than that, it was mentioned at the work session that the cumulative substantial damage improvement provision is already current in the ordinance. That's true. However, it's for 1.5 foot of freeboard, not 3 foot. And it doesn't have to be there for 3 foot of freeboard. It can remain at 1.5 foot. And it doesn't have to be cumulative either. Right now it says cumulative within 10 years. So you can have your home damaged 10% 1 year, 10% 1 year, 10% 1 year, and 10% another, and have to raise your home. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be for a one-time event. You heard during the work session that right now its cost to the city of Portsmouth residents is $30,000 to $60,000 to raise your home. That's true. But that's for 1.5 foot of freeboard. That's not for 3 feet. For 3 foot of freeboard, just like it's going on in Norfolk, it'll cost $75,000 to $250,000 to raise your home. Those were the studies that I cited in the letter that I wrote, that I sent to you guys today. I also want to be clear, I can't read my own writing here, that not adopting these provisions that I've outlined in the letter you won't lose your CRS rating and you won't be kicked out of the CRS. The only thing is the firm. And it won't lower your rating. In fact, you can still improve it by adopting some certain things. For homes that are damaged by a non-flood related event, you can adopt the following criteria, which is what Norfolk has done. You can require that a building be structurally damaged by a flood-related event before triggering the freeboard increase. You can apply only flood damages when calculating the cumulative impact on a property. And as I mentioned before, the impacts don't have to be cumulative. It was also mentioned that Portsmouth's hydrology was similar to those in which they modeled its ordinance after. It should also be mentioned that none of those municipalities adopted the cumulative impact provisions. And I know this because I worked with all the municipalities and trying to work with this because we had a big concern with the homeowners and those that would be impacted by the damages that were non-flood related that couldn't afford $75,000 to $250,000 to increase the height of their home. And finally, the data presented in the chart right here is no longer valid. It's not even law anymore. The Flood Insurance Reform Act of 2012, and you can see right down there that that's what this is from, has been replaced and repealed. It was replaced with the Homeowner Flood Insurance Affordability Act of 2014, and the new law lowers the rate increases, prevents future rate increases, and implements a surcharge on all policyholders. And the law also repeals certain rate increases that have already gone into effect. So that's not even law anymore. But finally, TBA just wants to sit down and have an opportunity with the planning department officials to come up with a solution that works well for all homeowners, not just those that have $75,000 to $250,000 sitting around to raise their home. Not everybody in Portsmouth has that sitting around. So we just want to work with the city and come up with a solution. And thank you for your time.
Let me ask you, Mr. Clark, have you had a chance to speak with the city? Have you
We've emailed back and
concerns?
forth, but haven't come to an agreement.
Okay, what does that mean?
We've emailed
You're
back.
here.
I've emailed. Right,
How'd you get here? Did you email us or did you just show up?
I emailed planning, Meg
Okay.
Pittenger and Fred, I believe, a few times, but received no response.
Mr. Moody?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I would suggest until Mr. Clark and staff have had an opportunity to sit down, because once we get locked into this, I could see where it has potential to cost homeowners as well as save them some on the insurance end. But first of all, I'd like to see the current law and know what that is. But I think TBA is here to try to help the city and help homeowners, and I'd like for them to have that opportunity to do just that. So I would say we would refer this, would be my recommendation.
Okay. Ms. Simmons?
Well, I think I'm kind of in the same light. I was going to suggest eliminating the cumulative part, but would it, I was going to ask Mr. Godfrey, would we hurt anything if we deferred this to May 26th and give TBA and planning staff the time to report back anything they want to report back?
No. That
Would it
not
take
hurt.
us off of our
we have-
required schedule with FEMA?
We have built-in time to be able to do that. And
then
there's
I'd like
still, it will still require 2 readings by council. We have time to do
Then
that.
I would ask to defer it to the May 26th meeting.
I'll second that.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yeah, well, that was my question. Since this is the first reading, does this count as a first reading?
This is a public hearing, members of City Council. This is your first reading. But there's nothing to say you still can't consider the item on the 26th. Your final reading, though, would be your first meeting in June, because you're not trying to vote tonight.
So do
So I would advise that if you don't want to vote tonight, you defer the whole process. If you want to then have the public hearing on the 26th, because you're potentially going to have some change. That way you're not closing the door on that. But that's your option.
Yeah, I would defer.
In favor of that?
Yeah,
Defer?
defer.
Okay. All right, is there a motion to defer? Mr.
I have a
Murphy?
motion and a second
Okay.
to defer.
All right.
Members of council, you have a motion and a second to defer this item to May 26th, and it would come back to you as a public hearing item.
Okay. Very good.
Okay? And you're voting electronically. The vote is 7-0.
Very good.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that on May 26th, this item will come back and we will again hear speakers, and we will open it up to the floor as a public hearing. UP 1504, Midtown, Donald Curry Jr., representing Curry Engineering, requests a use permit for a Taco Bell restaurant with a drive-through at 1501 Frederick Boulevard. The property is designated for commercial development and is denoted as a regional activity center on the city's comprehensive plan's generalized future land use map. Vision principle, a robust economy for working men and women. Electronic roll call, and I have no registered speakers. Yes, sir.
Sir.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. As the clerk just indicated, this is a request for a use permit to construct a Taco Bell with a drive-through window at Midtown Marketplace, which is the new Kroger Center. The parcel that they're proposing to build on is a little over half an acre. And there's a picture on the left-hand side of this slide. This is one of really two parcels that remain undeveloped out at Midtown Marketplace. So there'll be this parcel, and the final parcel is actually right at the corner of Turnpike and Frederick. So they're proposing to build roughly a 2,500 square foot Taco Bell facility with a drive-through. The main reason for the use permit is that they are having a drive-through, so that's primarily what the staff focuses on. Just a couple of points to make. One is that there will be no new entrances onto Frederick Boulevard. They will use the existing entrances that were approved with the Midtown Marketplace concept plan. All of the access will either be through the adjoining site or the access road that goes around the perimeter of the parking lot to the interior of the property. The front elevation will look something like this. It does meet our standards in terms of the glazing, which is a standard in the ordinance, and we've determined that it does comply with the conditions of the previous approvals for the Midtown Marketplace Shopping Center. These are the left and right elevations. The drive-through windows on the left elevation in the upper portion of the screen. Surrounding uses, you have to the north the new Wendy's that was just built. To the east, you have the Kroger building. To the south is the new little strip center that's being built near the corner. My understanding is there'll be a Dunkin' Donuts and a number of other commercial uses in that building. And then across the street, you have the new Frederick Boulevard landscape project and West Haven Park community. This is one final picture of the site as it stands now. The Planning Commission met on April 7th and recommended approval 4-0 with conditions. And essentially the scope of those conditions are that they be substantial, and the construction be in substantial conformity with the concept plan that you have in your packet, as well as the renderings. that the landscaping done is compatible with the other landscaping along the Frederick Boulevard corridor, that they maintain all their licenses, permits, and approvals, and that they pay their taxes. And with that, I'll conclude my comments and try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, good news. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing on item UP 1504. At this time, if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak but did not have an opportunity to register, please come forward, give your name and address, and you will have up to 5 minutes to speak specifically on item UP 1504. Members of council, this public hearing is closed. We have a motion and a second, and you're voting electronically. This item is adopted 7-0. Excuse me, approved 7-0. Item C, SNC 1501, Prentice Place, ordinance granting the request of Tina Artis to change the street name of John T. Fisher Way between Effingham Street and Chestnut Street to Brighton Street. This name change is requested to restore the previous street name changed by the City Council on December 9, 2014. Vision Principle, a robust economy for working men and women. Electronic roll call, and I have a speaker.
Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, as indicated, this is a request to rename the street John T. Fisher Way to Brighton Street. This was in response to a request to change the name from Brighton Street to John T. Fisher Way that you considered considered and approved back in on December 9th, 2014, just last December. The street in question here is the segment between Effingham and Chestnut Street. And there were actually two sections of Brighton Street, one over in the Port Center Industrial Park area, which is circled, and then the street that's in question tonight, or the application applies to tonight, which is the line. The yellow area down below is the city parcel that was owned in the street that was vacated back last year. I want to say back in the summer. Again, a highlight of what is now officially John T. Fisher Way. There are 7 parcels that front on this street and are addressed on this street. The Fisher Funeral Home is on the north of that line or above that line. The Ortiz properties are to the south of that line. This is a map of the properties that are owned by the Fisher family, which is essentially all but 4 of the parcels that adjoin the street. Pictures of the funeral home, which is on the north side of John T. Fisher Way. And then on the south side, these are the residential properties that are on John T. Fisher Way. And just to let you know, the Planning Commission did consider this item again at their April meeting. Their recommendation was to deny it 2-1 with 1 abstention. We only had 4 members present. And we did have one abstention. So okay. With that, I'll try to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Questions, comments? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our speaker is Ms. Tina Artis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Tina Artis, and I'm a resident of Portsmouth, Virginia. I live on John T. Fisher Way, which was previously known as Brighton Street. I come before you this evening because it's been a long, drawn-out process with this street name change. The first part of it At first, I received a letter in the mail saying that it was a request to change it to John T. Fisher Way, and we had to come to a planning commission meeting. I went to the planning commission meeting. They denied the change initially, and then I was unaware that it comes to the city council after that. You all had a meeting and you all approved it, and I was then informed that I should go back through the process to try to get it done over. And so I went back through the process, and I had put in an application and went to the planning commission, and they did deny it with terms that you all had just approved to change the name change. I'm a representative of Diamond Meadows LLC, which is the owners of 4 of the 7 parcels located on John T. Fisher Way. When we're speaking of John T. Fisher Way, the people that will be affected by this change are all residents, no business owners, because Fisher Funeral Home is technically addressed as Effingham Street. So they're not being affected by this change. However, they are trying to honor a certain citizen of Portsmouth, which I do respect, and I do suggest, we could suggest that, you know, it's an honorary street name change versus a real street name change, because as we all know, in this day and time, money is very tight. As like we're dealing with the budget issue, money is tight from the top to the bottom. So this will be a very expensive endeavor with keeping this name changed as John T. Fisher Way. We will have to contact insurance companies, different people, just to let them know, and they will have to come out, reevaluate. It will be another long, drawn-out process. So I'm asking you that you approve that this street name change goes back to its previous name change as Brighton Street. And it's actually 3 parts of Brighton Street. It's one down here in Port Center. It's one, John T. Fisher Way was previously known as Brighton Street, and it's also one in Midtown, located near the Midtown City, near Walmart. It's the first street past Turnpike. That's also a portion of Brighton Street, and these streets are named in love for the actual neighborhood and area of Brighton. So it's not just named after a person or after an organization. It's actually named after a neighborhood that's been in Portsmouth for a long time. So as I said before, I'm asking you that you approve this name change to go back to Brighton Street, so that it could kind of cut back on a lot of headache. We have residents that are there, that lives there on fixed incomes. We have residents that are seeking employment. So we have a lot of different things. I have a newborn child, so we have a lot of different things on this street. But like I said, it's all residents that are being affected by this change, and I'm a representative of the owner, of the property owners of the properties on John T. Fisher Way.
Thank you. Any questions from Ms. Ortiz? Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a public hearing on item SNC 1501. At this time, if there is anyone in the audience that would like to speak but did not have an opportunity to register, please come forward, give your name and address, and you will have up to 5 minutes to speak specifically on item SNC 1501.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow citizens. When I ran my eye over today's agenda and saw this item, I was curious about the circumstances that would lead somebody to ask for a reversion of a name that was changed recently in honor of somebody who was a pillar of the community. And so I wanted to hear what Ms. Ortiz had to say about this. And her reasons for requesting the reversion all seem eminently practical. Essentially, there are unforeseen burdens being imposed on people who actually reside on that particular right-of-way. And it seems to me her solution is a rather practical one as well. If there were a way to name that in honor of Mr. John T. Fisher and allow the Postal Service to continue to service it as Brighton Street, it would seem to be the best of all possible worlds. So I support her request and hope that you will find a way to use our legal structure to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I ask staff a question?
Yes, sir.
Just curious, in the process, was it ever mentioned as far as any of the financial difficulties that changing street names have on residents? Was that taken into consideration?
The Planning Commission had a dialogue of that issue. And just to comment on and we didn't do an analysis or any detailed analysis. One of the costs associated with any street name change is how it affects property owners and the fact that they need to change it. All of their mailing addresses and legal documents. But that's part of the process in deciding whether to change a street name or not.
How about the honorary naming of the street?
The honorary naming is something that the Planning Commission did raise, and we've prepared a presentation for the Planning Commission to consider that and forward it on to you as a potential policy and an alternative to the process that we went through with John T. Fisher Way, where you would essentially name a street, an honorary street. Technically the mailing address would not change, but you would put up a sign as an honorary sign, and that should be coming to you in the next month or two as a policy recommendation from the Planning Commission.
So you would have the honorary name as well as the street name visible? Correct.
Keep in mind that one of the key aspects of any street name is 911 and emergency response. So you want to make sure that your street is clearly named and there isn't any confusion about an honorary versus a real name. So that's one of the issues to sort out.
Well, if that's a policy issue that's coming to us, can we defer this till the policy comes and look at it as well as discuss it with the family involved?
I think this. Mr. Chair, let me see if he.
Yes, Mayor. You know, we've already gone through this process with this street change. It's been done. A lot of money been put out by the recipient of this street name change. We don't know if we're going to approve honorary streets. This one should stand on its own as we voted it up. And if we want to consider honorary in the future, we can do that. I personally have my own issue with honoraries because they're going to be very confusing. And once you go down the honorary path, it's going to be hard to get back. Right now, we don't have a problem with street name changes. I've been up here almost 5 years. This is the first one we voted on. The last time we did street name change, 2 city attorneys ago brought some street name changes, I think, for some honorary streets in a new neighborhood being built. So in some cases, I think the honorary thing is a solution looking for a problem. They rarely come to light for street name change. I've lived through a couple of them. One right here in the city of Portsmouth. My mail never stopped coming. You know, when I sent my bills, and I just sent a little block, change address, and changed it. Didn't cost me a dime. So I don't see the rationale of going back on this particular decision that's already been made, and a ceremony which you attended along with I, and try to backtrack on that. If we want to consider honoraries in the future, that's fine. But this one is, in my opinion, done.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Any other comments? Mr. Moody?
I agree with my colleague. You know, the street name change went through a process, and those who didn't want the name change certainly had an ample opportunity to speak to it. And, you know, the street name has been changed just recently. I think to change it back and get into a situation where people start questioning whether they like the name of the street. I think the name of my street's too long. When I go to fill out a contest to win a car that I never win, it takes me twice as long. But on a serious note, it's the name has been changed, and I think it would open Pandora's box to undo it.
So is there a motion to deny?
I make that motion to deny it.
Excuse me. We have speakers. Okay. All right. You got another speaker? Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir, you can come forward.
Good evening. My name is Leslie Nash. I live at 825 Brighton Street. I would just like to reiterate what Ms. Artis is saying about the inconveniences that we all share as being citizens on this street, and then the fact that Fisher Funeral Home is once again not located on Brighton. It is on Effingham Street. And also, I never met John T. Fisher. I would not doubt that he is owed some sort of tribute, but I hardly doubt that this is the correct avenue for that. I understand a decision was made, but to me it seems that the arguments that are being put against us changing it back to Brighton should have been placed against it being changed in the first place. That can of worm has already been opened, and just because we're following suit, going through the process like we're supposed to be, I don't think that should be belittled here. And I would never try to belittle your experience, Councilman Cherry or Moody, with your street names. So I think the citizens that live on this street are taking this very serious, and I don't see a lot of room for joking or saying that, belittling it in that fashion. I'd just like to make it clear that this is a real situation we're dealing with. We're real citizens of this street. We live on this street, and we have to live with every change that comes through it. We take care of this street. We keep it clean. In my experience, I've been living on this street for 13 years now, and I've known Fisher Funeral Home to be there as a location. I've seen the workers, but I haven't seen them participate or contribute to this street in any facet. But we protect this street. We keep it secure. We keep it clean, and so it means a lot to us. And that's all I would like to say.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Artis. I live at 825 Brighton Street. You mentioned earlier, Mr. Moody or Cherry, I can't remember who said it, about Pandora's box being opened. I think that you guys have already opened that box by allowing a business to influence the change of a street that the business is not even located on. If that's how the thing should work about street name changes, then any business owner at this point can just come and say, oh, well, I've had a business here for a while, and I'd like to have my street named, after me just because it's close to me. Not that it would affect my business or anything, but I just want this side street to be named after my dad who owned this business. To me, you've already opened that Pandora's box, because now who's to say that other business owners won't do that, because that's what's happening here. As far as the honorary street name, I think there is something already in place for that, because there are a couple streets in Portsmouth that have honorary names. So I don't see why you would need to defer or wait for some type of legislation to come through when evidently this is something that you all have done before. Because in fact, there are honorary streets in Portsmouth right now. So I think that would be an excellent idea to honor this man that owned a business in Portsmouth. Yes, he was very successful. Yes, he was paid for everything he did in this city. So to name a street after him just for the hell of it, or just because, I think that opens a really big can of worms as well. And just like the last speaker just said, I kind of feel a certain way now, because you're kind of you make it seem like it's a joke. Like, oh, my street name's too long. Well, that's not why we're changing it back, Mr. Moody. We're changing it back because it was originally named after the neighborhood. So anyway, that's all I have to say. I hope that you guys consider changing it back to Brighton Street, because it is a hardship for us to try to call all of our insurances. Everything that we have to do, my direct deposit, everything would have to change simply because this guy who owned a business wants to, change the street name on the side street. Again, that does not affect his business. Wants to change the name of the street, but it's going to affect us and all the other residents. So That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Sims.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this body has learned a valuable lesson from this little scenario. And I personally asked the question when we heard this originally. The representative from Fisher Funeral Home got up and made a nice statement. And I asked how many in the audience were here in support of her or her comments, and quite a few people stood up. And I asked who was here in the audience against the name change, and there was no one. Now, ignorance is not an excuse, but I think it is up to the city government to make sure citizens are aware of what the process is. And although I think making the change was the right thing to do, I can absolutely see how it affects residents on the street. And we should have heard from them, and we didn't. And I'm sorry we didn't kind of pause and make sure we heard from those residents. It's a tough call. I don't want to turn around and change it back again, but I'd sure like for us to look at this procedure in the future when it involves residences.
Okay, very good. Mr. Chair.
Just for a point of clarification, I was at the Planning Commission meeting when this was heard, and as stated at all planning commissions, part of that procedure was the items heard here today we heard by City Council on such and such a date at such and such a time. That's said at every meeting. So it's not like it was not publicized, not like it was not told to those sitting in the audience. I'm sorry she missed the meeting too, but I know it was stated because I was sitting right behind Mr. Hartley. I think he was sitting in about the same seat.
Okay, thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
Members of council, seeing no additional speakers come forward, this public hearing is closed. We're in need of a motion. We have a motion and a second for denial, and you will be voting electronically. This denial is approved 5-2. Members of council, even though this is a denial, you have the option whether this comes back for a second reading. Is it your wish for this to come back in 2 weeks? You have an option of it not coming back. Okay.
For a second, do we need to
Is there
vote
pleasure
yes
for
or
a second?
Normally,
No.
even though it's being denied, it would come back, but
Second
because
reading.
it's being denied, council has the option whether it comes back or not. So I need to know whether you're trying to have it come
Majority
back.
said no.
No?
We got a majority no.
Okay.
Okay.
So this item will not come back for the second reading. Okay. City Manager's Report, 15-197, adoption of ordinances and resolutions to appropriate the total sum of $20,544 for the operation of city government for fiscal year 2015-16 for the following areas. City operating budget, $443,333,941. Capital Improvement Fund, $33,419,887. The Parking Authority Capital Improvement Fund, $150,000. Public Utilities Capital Improvement Fund, $22 million. Portsmouth Public Schools operating budget, $168,716,716. Vision Principles, Change and New Directions, a robust economy for working men and women. Lifelong learning community, neighborhoods and a sense of community, efficient responsive government, quality of life, and pride of past. Item A, adoption of an ordinance to amend and reenact ordinance number 2014-47 to impose and levy taxes for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2015 and ending June 30, 2016 on real estate, tangible personal property, privately owned pleasure boats, privately owned camping trailers and motorhomes, and machinery and tools within the city of Portsmouth, Virginia for the purpose of raising revenue for the support of governmental operations and the public free schools, and to pay principal and interest on public debt. The ordinance increases the tax on real estate of other than public service corporations and public service corporations from $1.27 on $100 assessed valuation to $1.30 on each $100 assessed valuation. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers.
Okay.
Do you want to speak before the speakers?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay. Mr. Meeks?
Thank you, Mayor. I know we passed that we're going to give the veterans a pass on their personal property and their real estate. Today it came to my attention that some of the businesses that are owner-operators, that their equipment's in their own name, they'll be applying for the same piece. Would that fall under that category, or do we have that in language?
I don't understand you.
They're not a veteran.
Just, no, I'm saying if they are a veteran, if they have a business, like if they have trucks and equipment that is in their personal name.
This is for one personal vehicle.
One, does it say one?
Personal vehicle.
Okay.
Not a business vehicle.
If it's in their personal name, it's still personal vehicle, correct?
And that conforms with state code.
Right.
Okay. That's all I wanted to check.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. Our speakers, Mr. Mark Godoldik-Uchowski. Is he in the room somewhere? Okay. And he's followed by Ms. Pat Simons.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow citizens. As I have written to you, I have watched with dismay as this budget season has played out. Following the formal introduction of the former city manager's budget proposal on March 30th, I watched a hasty retreat on the part of all council members from what was laid out there. And I have seen what, to me, look like very ineffective strategies for getting as far away from that budget as possible. The problem is, when you take something that has been put together as a coherent whole over a matter of months, and then try to pick it apart and reassemble it in a matter of weeks. There are things that get missed. There are things that get underemphasized. And there are things that get run over. As I expressed it to you in my letter of May the 11th, across-the-board budget cutting is a brain-dead approach. You've seen it. You've seen how it's played out in Washington with sequestration. The baby, the bathwater, they all go down the drain. And when I elected you as my representatives, I expected you to use good judgment in the execution of your duties. And that means you have the ability to prioritize expenditures. It's common for people to talk about fat in government in terms of budgets, in terms of staffing. But although a lot of people throw that term around, when it comes down to identifying where those excesses are, it gets very quiet in the room. It's your job as our board of directors to look at where the unnecessary expenditures are, not to take a meat cleaver to the budget and say, off with their 6.5% heads. Cut them all off. That shows no discrimination. That shows no insight into where the excesses are. And so I resent that process. I think you have hit on certain areas that could be reduced. The sheriff's budget is certainly one of those areas. Judge Morrison was here last night. He and the sheriff had a conversation that he discussed with you and with the public. And out of that discussion, there was an agreement that 16 positions could go. I'm not sure that that's the totality of it, but there appears to have been a respectful give and take surrounding that number, and that was a good starting point. Still to be resolved is the issue of filling the beds that we're paying for in the regional jail. That should be pursued. To pay for beds that are now empty is not good fiscal management. So something should happen, but not in the way that it didn't happen last week when two strong-willed people who have never talked to each other in the time they've both been in office were leading the discussion. This needs to be reapproached, and cooler heads need to prevail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Pat Simons, and she's followed by Mr. Ron Evans.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I've spent the past 6 weeks watching each of you try and come to grips with this tax increase. And what I witnessed last night was you finally kind of admitted to yourselves you really didn't have a way to go about it and a proper way to figure it out. So I witnessed you, Mr. Mayor, determine and go around the room and do a consensus of how much we're going to increase the tax rate. And so you first determined after your vote that it was going to be 3 cents. And then you decided to try and back your way into it. All right, how do we get it from, I believe it was 4.5 cents, how do we get it down to the 3? So you kind of put it in reverse then and started chopping away at things. When the rate was discussed, I had to kind of agree with Bishop Edmonds when he said he wanted to see it at 0. He did not want to see a tax increase. And over the past 6 weeks, when it first came to light it was going to be 17 cents, you were all pretty much in agreement that there was going to be no tax increase. So finally, the night before the vote on the budget, you determined, yes, there will be an increase. And you really kind of, I believe, Mr. Mayor, have, from what I saw in the comments about the sheriff and the specific way you addressed, you give him $7.5 million. And he's got 189 employees. And you want to know where every one of them are and what every one of them are doing. Now, you're giving the school board $52.5 million. And they have over 1,000 administrators, and you're not asking a question about them after the misappropriation of funds from the schools? Where do you think more fluff lies? In 1,000 employees or 189? I believe what I've witnessed is a personal vendetta you have against the sheriff, and I don't know why. That's all my comments on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Ron Evans. Let's see here.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ron Evans, lifelong resident, reside in the Rollingwood section of the city. Talking about a tax increase. Although the original proposed tax increase has been reduced substantially, no kudos here, I and many others believe that any increase in the tax rate will be detrimental to the city as a whole. I don't have any figures as to the number of houses for sale in Portsmouth, but a brief tour will show that it is substantial. Anyone want to wager that the number will increase if this tax hike is adopted? What former Governor McDonald did in making this sweetheart of a deal for its benefactors with a 58-year contract for the tunnel tolls is a travesty. But now it seems as if this council is willing to drive yet another nail in our coffin with this increase. I made the analogy between the haves and the have-nots at the last meeting, but it bears repeating. A person living in a house assessed at around $125K with poverty level income pays a whopping 13.5% of that income in real estate taxes alone. Whereas someone living in a house valued at $250K with an income of $120K only pays 2.7 of theirs. Find this disparity hard to stomach. There is no recourse to getting any relief unless, number one, you are disabled, or number two, you're over 65, a point in some lives where 1 foot is already in the grave. Some states have a Homestead Act relief in place where taxes are deferred or reduced as long as you've been at the same residence for a period of 5 years. To my knowledge, Virginia does not. Again, no relief. We can't even get any relief on the refuge part of our utility bills that was promised once the recycling rate hit a 30% participation rate. I have on good authority we have surpassed a 50% participation rate, but still our bills remain unchanged. We are also saddled with a 33% tax increase on our vehicles, the so-called license fee part of the bill. Of the personal property tax bill. The budget as a whole should be deferred. We still have time. Got to the end of June. This increase is passed, more people will leave, including businesses, with no one to fill the voids, further eroding our tax base, which will doom the city, and its blood will be on your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Members of council, there are no additional speakers on this item. We're in need of a motion.
Move for approval.
Mayor, we have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically.
Okay.
This item is adopted 4-3. Item B, adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 13 of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia by amending Sections 13-71 through 13-74 and adding a new section 13-75, and to amend Appendix A of said code to establish or modify fees and classifications for emergency response services. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Mark Godoldi-Gutrovsky, and he's followed by Ms. Pat Simons.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow citizens. Well, you've passed the part of the budget that gets all the press, but there are fees that hit the pocketbooks of average citizens that are not so well publicized. In fact, the paper didn't publicize these at all. Nonetheless, for those who are subject to the fees, they are rather dramatic. I'm looking at Appendix A with fees modified and sections added to the code that the appendix applies to. Under this proposal, the fee for non-emergency incident response and ambulance transport with basic life support services increases from a not inconsequential $200 to $290.38. Emergency incident response and ambulance transport with basic life support services increases by a more modest $34, but the baseline for this is $430. So the new fee goes to $464. Non-emergency incident response and ambulance transport with advanced life support level 1 services, whatever that means, goes from $217 to $348.46. Emergency incident response and ambulance transport with advanced life support level 1 services goes a small amount from $511.19 to $551.73. The problem is the baseline is not inconsequential at $511. And the one that really knocks your eyes out is emergency incident response and ambulance transport with specialty care transport services. It's now at $588. It jumps to $943.75. You will recall that the people in our General Assembly have declined to adopt the Medicaid reform that was part of the Affordable Care Act. So people at the lowest levels of income, people who would otherwise have had access to Medicaid, are denied that. When I last looked at the figures, that was some 400,000 citizens in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so those folks will be at considerable disadvantage under this new fee schedule. Now, I looked at the CPI between last year and this year, and the inflation rate, the cost of goods, has increased by 1%, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Every one of these fees represents more than a 1% increase. I don't recall when some of these fees were changed last, but it wasn't that long ago. And it seems like a backdoor tax increase on some of the people least able to afford it. I did not sign up for the next several items, but I want to say that items B, C, D, E and F all impose higher levels of fees that people will encounter in some dealing with the city of Portsmouth. Again, these have received no press. I think that it is not transparent. I think that the case for raising those fees has not been made, not even back on March 30th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Pat Simons.
Good evening again. I had a lot of the same figures written down that Mark just went over, so I won't go over each one of them individually again. But I did want to just point out that most of them are, the lowest one I saw was about 45%, where you're looking at $100 and some dollars. Some of them are 60% increases on these fees, which in my opinion is just beyond belief. But really what concerned me and stood out to me were the new fees. You now have patient assessment fee. So I'm assuming that once an ambulance shows up, they have to assess that patient, and that patient is going to pay $125 just because somebody showed up to assess their situation. But the real one for me that took the cake is this new fee, DOA, dead on arrival. Now, it used to be $0, but now this poor dead person is going to have to pay $75. Now, I suggest, citizens, let that be a lesson to you. Call a cab. If you have to go and you can't take yourself, call a cab. Don't put up with this stuff.
Thank you, ma'am.
Members of council, there are no additional speakers.
Move for approval. Move for approval.
You're on B.
We're on B, yes. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Mayor, we have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically.
Okay.
This item is adopted 5-2. Item C, adoption of an ordinance to amend Chapter 7 of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia by amending Sections 7-103, 104, 105, 105.1, 131 through 133, and 135, and to amend Appendix A of said code to establish or modify fees and classifications for building and other permits and inspections. Electronic roll call, and I have a speaker. Our speaker is Ms. Pat Simons.
Sorry, I couldn't pass this one up. Building permit fees, practically every one of them are new. The only one I saw that wasn't new was to get a certificate of occupancy on an existing structure. That one is currently $25 and it's going to $50. Only a $25 increase, but that's 100% increase. Now, the new fees, to get a certificate of occupancy, $50. To renew one, if you just want to renew one, it's $100. Why would to renew it be more than to get it? I don't understand. If a commercial company wants one, it's going to cost them $100. And if the commercial business wants to renew a certificate of occupancy, it's going to cost him $200. How many, I hope the Taco Bell builds quick before July 1st, because I doubt many more are going to want to come.
Thank you, ma'am.
Members of council, there are no additional speakers on this item. I'm in need of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 5-2. Item D, adoption of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia to increase permit fees authorized by Chapter 32 of said code. Electronic roll call, and I have no registered speakers.
Need a motion.
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 5-2. Item E, adoption of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia to increase hauling fees authorized by Chapter 22 of said code. Electronic roll call, and I have no registered speakers.
Move to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 4-3. Item F, adoption of an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia to increase certain site plan and erosion and sediment control plan review fees, and to add new fees for certain resubmissions of plans and certain inspections prior to the issuance of certificates of occupancy as authorized by Chapter 40.1 of said code. Electronic roll call, and I have a registered speaker, Ms. Pat Simons.
I just wanted to point some of these out so that each of you will really stop and think about how many people are going to be building in this city when they start looking at increases like this. A site plan review fee for residential and commercial, if it's less than 1 acre, it's going up 100%, from $200 to $400. If they have 1 to 5 acres, it is going up $400 to $800, another 100% increase. If it's larger than 5 acres, which there probably aren't many in Portsmouth, it goes from $600 to $1,200, another 100% increase. Now, erosion and sediment control plan is increasing 167%. And new fees now, $75 if you have to resubmit your plan, plus $100 for a final inspection for a certificate of occupancy. How many people are going to come and build and prepare their site plans? Very few.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have no additional registered speakers on this item.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 5-2. Item G, adoption of an ordinance adopting the FY 2015-16 classification and pay plan for the employees of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia. That includes a 2% general wage increase for full-time general employees and non-essential, non-temporary, part-time general employees, and B, 1% adjustment of retirement allowance as prescribed in sections 30-122 and 30-243 of the Code of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Mark Godolda-Gutrovsky.
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow citizens. My motto is sign up early and often. This undoubtedly was the squishiest part of the revised budget. And only Councilmember Meeks really had an inkling as to the distinction between raises for current employees and raises for retirees. But he didn't stick to his guns on that issue when everybody said, oh, this is the way we have traditionally done it. Well, that does not make a good budget. What we have traditionally done got us to a place in this budget season where we had nearly a $12 million hole to fill. So you need to take approaches that are non-traditional. And our past city manager, Mr. Rowe, started that process with the pension obligation bonds used to shore up the Portsmouth supplemental retirement system. But that comes at a price. $173 million worth of debt for the citizenry of Portsmouth that is there in the background from now going forward for the next 20 years or so. And that will be built into every budget from this point forward. So one of the objectives of that bond issue was to have a base fund for those retirees that would be able to pay them additional money each year based on the performance of those funds. Additionally, those in the Portsmouth Supplemental Retirement System got a huge bonus when you eliminated the Social Security offset. We should have absolutely no obligation to them, those folks who were in that system, for the rest of their lives. Because you're talking about hundreds of dollars a month that they are now collecting that they were not before. I don't feel bad for them. Yes, it is right to increase the salaries of people who come to work every day. There should be a cost of living allowance, but it should be pegged to an index, just as mortgage rates are pegged to an index. Last year, you raised our taxes, you raised our registration fee for vehicles by $7, so you could give an additional 1% over what you had the money in reserve to raise salaries. I'm surprised you didn't go back to the same well this year so you could make it a 3% increase again. You have no index. As I said previously, the CPI increased by 1%. Reasonably, to keep the people on payroll abreast of the rise in cost of living, you would have had a 1% increase. There should be a rational basis for figuring out what the increase will be, not just whether this is an election year for council or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Ron Evans.
Good evening once again. This pay classification, a pay increase while jacking our taxes and fees up, as well as jeopardizing the future of the city? I think not. If anything, we should be cutting positions. When I see at least 3 departments, probably many more, that subcontract work that the city employees used to perform, it's illogical. So now, not only are we paying the city employees salary, but the contractors as well. No wonder we're struggling. We need to cut one of them loose, or at the very least, downsize the departments. You can contort the figures all you want, but unless the subcontractors are working for a minimum wage, I cannot fathom the city saving any money. A raise, really? With all the benefits afforded, I see no justification. For this year, workers get 15 paid holidays, with Thanksgiving now being a 3-day event. Also, sick leave, annual leave, and a large portion of their health care paid for by the taxpayer. Used to be 90%. I don't know what it is now. My point being, all these benefits equal dollars, taxpayer dollars. I don't believe they'll do as well in the private sector. This is not the time for a raise. I'd rather see that money used elsewhere, like public safety, road repair, signage, road striping, or something besides buying votes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Our next speaker is Mr. William Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Bill Baker. I am the president of the Southeast chapter of the Police Benevolent Association. Our association is made up of law enforcement professionals locally and across the state. We have approximately 4,000 members. The Southeast chapter has a long history of political involvement in Portsmouth, holding candidate screenings, endorsing candidates, and partnering with the local politicians in an effort to improve law enforcement profession serving the citizens. We take pride in our relationship with our elected officials and our record of positive change for professionalism and increased public safety. Our members are fully aware of the budget issues facing the council. We recognize that priorities must be set. As you deliberate funding, I would ask you each to consider the fact that when trimming the budget items like police training, equipment, take-home vehicles, pay, and benefits should be absolutely the last place you should look for cuts. Using public safety budget and public safety benefits as an easy place to save funding has a direct negative impact on public safety. Cutting public safety funds makes our city less safe, which in turn makes your job and our job more difficult. The citizens deserve to be safe in their community. They elected you to ensure that they have a well-trained, fully funded professional police, fire and EMS, and sheriff's organization. The law enforcement professionals in Portsmouth should never be referred to as one elected official's boys. We are all professionals who are more than willing to work with the council. Members to find ways of dealing with the budget shortfalls while balancing the primary job we all share, which is safety of the citizens of Portsmouth. I offer each of you, please contact me anytime to meet and discuss details of our perceptions within the department. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Well done.
Mr. Doug Funkhauser.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, citizens of Portsmouth. My name is Doug Funkhauser. I am the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, Gosport Lodge number 20 in the city of Portsmouth. As you approach your votes tonight, and some votes you've already taken today, you're based on information that you've received, and some of it is misleading. I want to provide you some facts today before you finish the rest of your votes. First, the Portsmouth police officers are not the highest paid officers in the region, and they never have been. A starting officer makes $36,347. After he finishes the academy, he goes to $38,260. The pay plan was put in place so that we could be at a minimum an average so that we can compete with other cities, so that we would not lose, as a city, our investment, so that these officers would not go to other jurisdictions and we would not lose these trained officers, so we could have a qualified officer to give our citizens a high quality, a better performing officer so that their safety is priority one. Next, the budget cuts are going to show that equipment, tasers, bulletproof vests, that is unacceptable. That is an officer's safety. Our vehicles are going to be cut. Our take-home cars. These vehicles are put in place so that we can respond 24/7. That helps us respond to calls when our citizen needs us, whether it's a disaster or calls to service, whether we're off duty or on duty. Our citizens need that. And it's no cost per our city manager, no cost. In saying that, there are cuts to our sheriff's department. Our sheriff department helps us with deputies on the street. That is unacceptable. Security in the court is a priority to our citizens, to our judges, to our attorneys, and to the officers that testify in court. Freezing vacant positions is not the way to go. If we freeze vacant positions, it's going to put less officers in the street, and then we'll be right back where we were 6 years ago, with only few and maybe 6 to 10 officers back on the street. Members of council, I've heard y'all talk about many times about respect in your meetings, and I demand, and my organization demands nothing the less. I represent men and women who are professional law enforcement officers. They are master patrolmen, they are deputies, they are detectives, they are master deputies, they are sergeants, they are lieutenants, they are captains, they are fire marshals, they are retired sheriffs, they are retired chiefs of police. I myself have proudly served this city honorably for more than 2 decades. I have been a law enforcement officer for this city for over 2 decades, a homicide detective, a training officer, a master patrolman. Mr. Mayor, with all due respect, sir, do not ever refer to us again, please, as boys, or the people I represent as boys. We are professionals. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. William Quinlan.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council staff. My name is Rusty Quillen. I'm president of IAFF Local 539, Portsmouth Professional Firefighters and Paramedics. First, I want to say thanks to all of you for the work you're being put into this budget process and all that entails. Everyone knows it's not an easy task to make some of the decisions having to be made at this time. I also want to make it clear that we support the efforts of our chief. He's making to do his job for us with what he's been given in limited resources. With that being said, we're here tonight to shed some light on our concerns, what should be the concerns of the citizens of Portsmouth and council about the effects cuts in budget and positions within public safety, specifically the fire department, will and already have had. Over the past 5 years, we've been placing Ladder 3 serving the Churchland area out of service daily due to staffing shortfalls, and occasionally placing Engine 2 out of service at the same time from our downtown station, our busiest station in the city. This is not only dangerous for the citizens, but also to our personnel that may have to work on the scene for longer periods of time without assistance from other units. Presently, this shortfall is due to no increased staffing over the years to adjust for our EMS service and responsibilities that the fire department assumed in 1996. As most of you know, that service started out with 2 full-time medic units and 1 part-time medic unit that shuts down in the evening with the city, and has grown to 5 medic units operating 24 hours now. We have a need for an additional medic at this time also due to run volume. All of this has been done with the staffing levels from 96, with a few full-time and part-time paramedics added to our non-sworn staff. The The rest of the staffing for EMS has come from our fire trucks and removing available leave slots over the years from our personnel. This increased service to our public has been borne on the backs of the dedicated employees of our department entirely. Presently, it takes 20 people daily just to staff our medics alone, with the majority having come from fire apparatus over the years. In the recent work sessions, we've been hearing the number 17 for positions being frozen within the fire department to help cover budget shortfalls in the 2015-16 operating budget. This number, along with shortfalls we already have, would be detrimental to the services we provide to our citizens and to the morale of our department as a whole. To continue our operations without filling those positions will definitely place even more weight and loss of benefits on those already out here doing the job, as we call it. Our trucks are staffed currently with 3-person minimum, the least efficient staffing matrix according to IAFF studies. You do the math, this 17-person reduction would further cause additional units to be placed out of service, endangering our citizens and staff with longer response times, longer on-scene times without help, more work by fewer personnel, and increased burden on our neighboring localities from mutual aid, and that is unacceptable. This decrease is also attacking the structure of our department, with potential promotions not being made or positions dropped altogether, undermining our chain of command and levels of experience on the fire ground and in the EMS setting. I've been hearing the word diversity and disparaging being passed around a lot lately in the context of our public safety departments. With the cuts to our staffing and freezing upward mobility within, how can we possibly expect to move forward in the area of minority recruitment, retention, and advancement to help our department better reflect hiring goals for a diverse workforce by attracting candidates to the best performing public safety departments in the region? These cuts are just the beginning of many problems that will snowball in the future. If you're not aware, it takes approximately 8 to 10 months to train a new recruit to get placed on the floor to work. This, along with slow hiring process that can take up to a year, and those that don't make it through the rigorous training when hired, could potentially leave us understaffed by double that amount very quickly. Not to mention 30-plus 321 employees within our ranks and the police that can leave at any time to seek other avenues. Secondly, it's been mentioned recently to the public that we, the public safety family, are the highest paid in the region. This could be nothing further from the truth. You have copies of some matrix up there and some EMS accolades the division has accomplished and encompassed efforts from all of our staff that would in itself justify us being the highest paid in the region, but as you can see, that's not true. Lastly, but definitely not least, how many pennies is a potential lost life worth? 1, 2. Can I finish?
Thank you, sir. No. Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Quinlan, I have a couple of questions because I noticed in your comments you were mentioning about quite a bit of danger, and I know there's been some social media comments that have been made also. Do your firefighters go out for professional training?
Well, yes, sir. I mean, just the beginning of the career, the 8 to 10 months it takes to get us on the street is the beginning.
Right.
We never stop our learning process.
Right.
It's
So
continual.
So throughout their tenure, they get training.
Correct.
Right. And when they go to get training, they have to go off-site.
Sometimes we have stuff in-house. It depends on the class. And
When they go off-site for training, they are no longer at the fire station. So who covers for them when they go off-site?
It depends on the school, the training. Sometimes we may use callback staffing, overtime to backfill.
You have persons to cover for them when they go on training.
Well, if you're talking to or referring to trade time, we have the ability to trade time with other personnel so that we don't lose staffing.
Right. So if someone goes off-site for training, then you have personnel to cover for them when they go off-site for training.
Yes.
Right. So you mentioned that there are ladders that are out of service.
Yes.
If those ladders are out of service and you have persons to cover when persons are off-site for training, then why are the ladders out of service? It would seem to me that you would have administrators that can cover that.
The ladders are being placed out of service, I guess, due to the restraints in our overtime budget.
But I'm saying, well, the point I was making was that you have persons who go out for off-site training and you cover for that. You have ladders that are out of service that could be covered by those same persons.
What
So I was
happens
just-
with the training scenario, Dr. Whitaker, is if I want to go out of town for a class or for some training that I choose to go to, I'm responsible to use my leave, or I'm responsible to find a replacement, a relief leave person to fill my spot. That has nothing to do with the overall staffing of the department or the overtime budget that would be available to bring in another person to replace me or somebody that we haven't hired.
Right. Okay. Also, I've been bringing up the diversity of both the police and the fire department. The statistics speak for themselves. I find it very disingenuous that you would come and raise an issue of diversity at the time of a budget funding issue when those issues of diversity haven't been raised in the past. And I just want to say I think that's very disingenuous to try to bring that up in the context of a budget discussion.
I'm sorry that you feel that way. I don't agree.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Good night. Well done.
Members of council, we have no additional speakers on this item.
Okay, we're in need of a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically after speakers.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, sir. I think it's always a good idea to explain to the public when you're going to vote no for something. As most of you know, I've been very vocal about these pay plans and a tax increase for a salary increase. And I thought early on in our budget discussions that the entire council was of a mind that it was not the time to give salary increases to any employees. But where we find ourselves today is what I think is frankly fiscally irresponsible on our part to give a raise that requires a tax increase to give it. And then on top of that, to give a raise to all employees except a certain group. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote no to this item.
Okay, very good. Mr. Meeks?
Thank you, Mayor. I have to agree with Elizabeth. One thing I've pushed is making sure our employees for the city has always gotten raised. This year I put forth last night to the council, instead of giving a raise, give a bonus. So it wouldn't cause the taxpayers a tax increase. They voted not to, so therefore I'll vote no to this, and that's the reason I'm voting no.
Very good. Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to vote no also. I think former Mayor Holly used to refer to it as the Portsmouth family. It's quite evident tonight that 2/3 of that family is getting left out. They too have to buy groceries and gasoline, and it is true that they're not the highest paid in the region as they've been wrongly accused. So I'll vote no tonight. I respect the job their general wage employees do. I don't think I've ever voted no, but I can't exclude the people who protect us and our property tonight. So,
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Mr. Godfrey, it's a question just for clarity. Does a bonus prevent a tax increase?
A bonus would still cost something, and that would therefore increase the need for more revenues and some increase in taxes. But it would be less than what is plugged in here for a raise.
Right. My question was that a bonus does not prevent a tax increase.
No, that's correct.
Right. Okay. I just want to make sure the public was clear on that you have to pay for it some way.
Right. Okay.
I'm not
All
even going to debate back and forth.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. This item is adopted 4-3. Item H, adoption of a resolution approving the Community Planning and Development 2016 Annual Action Plan of the City of Portsmouth, Virginia, and authorizing the city manager to file documents required to obtain the city's community planning and development grant entitlements. Electronic roll call, and I have no registered speakers on this item.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 6-1. Okay. Item I, adoption of an ordinance to appropriate $443,333,941 for the operation of city government during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2015. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Betty Ashbury. Ms. Ashbury will be followed by Mr. Steve Carroll.
My name is Betty Ashbury. I live in the Churchland section of Portsmouth. Up until now, everybody's been pretty nice to y'all. I'm not going to file a suit. So if you want to have me ejected, Mr. Mayor, here's what I've got to say. I'll hand it to the reporter on the way out. I'm thinking about changing my name to Dorothy anyway because, like in The Wizard of Oz, because there's a big storm brewing in the city of Portsmouth. And I feel like I've been transported from what I used to call my little piece of heaven called Portsmouth, Virginia, into hell. I've been a voter since I was 21 years old. And I've never missed a time to vote, except for a couple of times when I was sick. But I have never, ever witnessed a more inept or dysfunctional city council than I'm seated before me tonight. I'm alarmed by all the skullduggery, and if you don't know the meaning, consult Mr. Webster, and the closed meeting sessions that are held by the four amigos. It was suggested by someone that I should also refer to them as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. And I'm sure if you don't know what that is, then refer to your Bible. You may think you have a tiger by the tail now, but it may come back to bite you all in the three-letter word I'd like to use, I won't, your derriere, which happens to be French for behind. I can't imagine in my wildest dreams that you think the good citizens of Portsmouth, the Portsmouth family, young, old, black, white, will not fight back. And Mayor, as my dad would say, don't get mad, get even. You're cutting public safety to fully fund the school system, along with other budget cuts. But you're retaining an auditor who happens to be a neighbor of several of y'all on council, who's produced nothing to this point. But suppose, heaven forbid, we should have a Sandy Hook or a Columbine, and we don't have a properly staffed police department or one that's sufficiently equipped, or we should have a fire in one of our schools, high-rises, hospitals, or anywhere else that our firefighters who are overworked and are not properly equipped and have the manpower would be able to handle. As a concerned citizen, I feel like we should pool our resources, hire an attorney, hopefully pro bono, and see that the council be sued for reckless endangerment. Due to the element of our times, we need all the public safety personnel that we can get our hands on, not less. To all the seniors that receive assistance from the Sheriff's Department for tall grass, peeling paint, to keep from being cited and fined by the city, if it's no longer available, you can also blame the four amigos that took the budget cut, the biggest one, from the Sheriff's Department. I know that anything that's said at this meeting will be taken with a grain of salt, which is also an old saying my family used to use, because you were elected, it's really sad, because you were elected to represent all of the city's, Portsmouth families, from Churchland to Port Norfolk to Prentice Park to Craddock to Cavalier Manor to Truxton and all the rest of the city. and sadly, you're not doing it very well. I also have a problem with Councilman Whitaker voting on the school budget when he has personal ties with a board member. It seems to me that this is definitely a conflict of interest, which is described as a situation where a professional or corporation has a vested interest, which makes them more a reliable source. The interest could be money, statute, knowledge, or reputation. When such a situation arises, the party usually is asked to remove themselves, and often it is legally required. I think it's time for us to call some of the agencies in to do some kind of investigation of what's going on in our city.
Good night, Ms. Ashley.
Following Mr. Carroll is Mr. Ken Woolard.
Evening, Mayor, members of staff. Mr. Rowe made this very detailed presentation to council on February 13th, 2014, 1 year after the grand jury report. He summarized the spending of the school board and its fiscal policy thusly, with a number of points. This one in particular: stop padding their operating budget, end quote. This report is full of those practices by the school board. An example of one of those: a double billing for a roof repair project that, according to this report, was already almost completely paid for, but yes, the school board asked for additional money to cover it, and council gave it to them. Mr. Rowe documents that over $92 million in surpluses were generated by the school board during an 8-year period appearing to end 2014. Our current budget deficit is $11.4 million. That deficit could have been covered for 8 years. In fact, had those funds been properly returned to the taxpayers, we wouldn't be looking at a deficit or a tax increase. We'd be looking at a tax decrease. Mayor, you always talk about fairness. Fairness without integrity, without honesty, with truthfulness, mean nothing. I get the impression that truthfulness on our school board and this council are only relevant when it's politically expedient. You refuse to consider looking at the school budget. With this report and numerous other reports that indicate that the school board is not truthful and has not been truthful, why don't we look at it? As Schoolhouse Johnny used to say, "Teacher, I smell a rat." The other side of this coin is public safety cuts. In the last 2 weeks, we've had what, 8 armed robberies, a couple of murders and shootings, and you want to cut public safety. I ran for council in 2008 on this platform that our crime rate was almost 3 times the Hampton Roads average, and we are headed right back that way because of the irresponsible conduct of 4 members of this city council. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cutting public safety is penny wise and pound foolish. Also in that report from Mr. Rowe, the school board funded its OPEB budget with $7 million at a time when it only had to put $1 million in it. There's $1 million extra per year that you can avoid cutting public safety. You haven't been on a police ride-along, most of you. I know one of you has been on none. I've been on several with Virginia Beach and Portsmouth Police and Sheriff's Department. There's crazy people out there. Crazy people with maggots between their brains and a black hole in their chest where they ought to have a heart. And we got people on this city council and people who stand on the porch out here and criticize our police department. You don't know what you're talking about. That gunman that went into that cell phone store carrying a handgun, what if he had encountered a sheriff's deputy or a police officer with his back turned? What do you think would have happened? He would have capped him in the back. And you know what we'd have gotten from our good upstanding citizens of the city? Nothing. But they'll criticize the police department in a heartbeat. Always like the police, criticize the police until you really need one, don't we? And it goes without saying what happens when you have rhetoric, like we hear, inflammatory rhetoric, about a police department being murderers. This is what you get. And I'm calling for calm tonight and for people to let the state police do their job. And the truth will come out. And then live with the truth. We need our police department. We don't need to tear them down needlessly. And we need to restore that $1 million back to the sheriff's department. And stop funding a school board who doesn't tell us the truth about their funding practices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Following Mr. Woolard is Mr. Larry Gump.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilman, staff, and the citizens of Portsmouth. I am Ken Woolard. I live in the 400 block of Washington Street. I come before you this evening representing more than 600 members excuse me, of Portsmouth Community Concerts. First, let me thank you for restoring funding to our valued and historic Willett Hall. PCCI is embarking on its 77th season, and it's reassuring that we can sell tickets and we'll have a place for our performances. When artists come to Willett Hall from all around the world, they always comment on what a fine facility it is. Recently, ODU presented a musical showcase at Willett Hall. Dr. Nancy Klein of Old Dominion University will tell you there's no stage in this entire region that can accommodate the choral ensemble, orchestra, and dance departments, one location, one performance. She also consults for theaters throughout the world, and she has met with city staff. The interim manager was present. She pointed out the many fine attributes of this hall and made recommendations for improvements. If the city were to declare Willett Hall an endangered historic building, there are numerous grants available to help restore it. In the upcoming season, Community Concerts has 14 student engagement events planned. Our mission statement encourages educational opportunities for students at no cost to them. Due to the size of Willett Hall and the number of seats, we offer 750 complimentary tickets to Portsmouth school students, both public and private, so they may experience the thrill of a world-class performance, many of whom could never afford a concert ticket. 2 events, 1, 2, 3, Let's Dance, and Boost Your Brain Power, Move, involves the entire student population, both preschool and second grades. This addresses childhood obesity by introducing dance as a means of exercise. Our Heart and Soul reading program sends volunteers into 3rd grade classrooms, and we read to students during each visit. All events are SOL STEM compliant and have enjoyed support from the previous superintendent as well as the interim superintendent. In less than 10 years, Community Concerts has touched 23,000 students. And in the near future, we want to meet with Dr. Bracey and seek out his support. We want to thank you for your continued support of performing arts funding. When cuts have to be made, such as this year, we would ask that you concentrate on Portsmouth-based arts organizations and don't send 70% of our money to organizations in other cities. We have a rich history in presenting diverse performances. When Portsmouth music supervisor Gwendolyn Jenkins was a child, she attended concerts at Willett Hall. She went on to college. She returned to Portsmouth as a music teacher at IC Norcom. There she taught a young student named Crystal Williams. Miss Williams, in turn, sought her education in music and has recently won an international award for her mezzo-soprano. We are pleased to present her next May 1st, 2016, and she'll grace the stage at Willett Hall, closing 77 seasons. Music is an international language. We are convinced exposing students to music at young ages encourages them to finish school, go on to college, and return to our community, thus contributing to the quality and fabric of our lives. PCCI asks for your continued support for us and Willett Hall as we endeavor to enrich lives through the wonderful world of the performing arts. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And before you take your seat, thank you for what you do.
You are so
for our
welcome.
children. Good night.
Mr. Larry Gump, and he's followed by Mr. Nelson Velez.
Good evening, council, mayor, vice mayor, members of council, city staff, and citizens. I came up here tonight with a pre-prepared speech, and I'm just going to abandon it, and I think I'm going to speak from the heart tonight. I've come before this council on a few occasions, usually over matters that I consider incredibly important, or something that I felt impacted me so strongly that I absolutely had to come before this body and speak to you. But tonight, I've listened to all the discussions, and I've listened to citizens share their opinions, and listened to people pour their hearts out, essentially, and I'm pretty much heartbroken that that while we may not see an increase in divisiveness by numbers in the city, I think if divisiveness ever existed, it's certainly stronger tonight than it ever has been. And whether that's something the council has fostered is probably now irrelevant. But being a former police officer and firefighter who got injured on the job and who suffered financially as a result of it, and watching my brother and sister, firefighters and police officers, go through some of the same things, I want to have an opportunity to address the public safety issue first, and then I'll trail off and I'll keep it short. It's becoming harder and harder to convince people to want to move to this city or bring their business to this city. Everywhere I turn, and you can't blame the mainstream media for this, there's a very negative perception of the city. And when that perception is looked at, it's typically heaped on city council. Whether it's Wavy TV 10 highlighting the sheriff being locked out of a meeting that probably very well should have been open. I have a site on Facebook that talks about open government, and I've always been proud of the fact that I thought Portsmouth was pretty transparent, but recently that doesn't seem to be the case. And I've always tried to avoid calling out individual people, and I've made mistakes like anybody else, and I'm sure I've done it. But especially tonight with the firefighter thing, I don't know how to best put it. To call firefighters, folks who run in and protect us and run into a fire and pull us out, or EMS and folks who will stand by and watch some of the worst things and folks on their worst moment, when they come up here and talk to you and they share what, their needs with you, I take very serious discord with calling anything they say disingenuous. Police officers too. I mean, these are folks who, they, especially with what's going on nationwide right now, they're tolerating ridicule. They're being treated worse than ever, mostly undeservedly. There's always a few bad apples. We understand that, but they overwhelmingly get treated unfairly, I would say. And it's sad that they're going to sit here tonight and they're going to watch as they've worked hard and they've tried to overcome things, and they've dealt with attrition in this department, and they've dealt with shortcomings and short budgets and training and equipment, while other departments had equipment and they had to wait later. And now general wages are going to get a salary increase, and they're not. And that just really, it burns me. I don't know how I'm going to sell this city to anybody when I'm going to tell them their taxes are going to get increased, but they're going to see no tangible quality of life increase. If you can explain to me how I can walk into any store, and if I pay 5 cents for something and I get X for that, but tomorrow I'm going to pay 10 cents for X, people are going to stop going to that store. And people have options. And Portsmouth isn't the only city. It's a great city. I love the city. It's one of the few cities in Hampton Roads that has a certain kind of home feel. We've always considered ourselves family in this city. But if we're going to attack our public safety, those are the peacekeepers. Those are the people who defend us and provide us the safety blanket we all sleep under every single night. And I want to see the city prosper and flourish. And I think this vote y'all are doing tonight is a legacy vote for y'all. I think this is a legacy vote. I think people are going to remember this vote for a long time. I know I've talked to you, Mr. Cherry, Mr. Moody, spoke with you, Mr. Wright, Ms. Simmons, Mr. Meeks. Haven't had an opportunity to talk to you, Mr. Whitaker. I think I've talked to you on one or two occasions, Mr. Edmonds, and I have the utmost respect for you. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Nelson Velez, is he here? Did he leave? Okay. And he's followed by Ms. Pat Simons.
Good evening, Mayor.
How you doing?
Vice Mayor, City Council, and citizens of Portsmouth. Our days in Portsmouth has been very dramatic of late. A lot of unrest. I think that we've seen very difficult decisions being made. We've seen your judgment on parade in the last couple of weeks under pressure. We've seen one of the greatest purges this city has ever seen as leadership personnel has left this city, left these positions in the last 3 weeks. There's all kinds of red flags, as far as coming together. Losing all these people on a critical time doesn't lend for confidence. It doesn't suggest cohesion. Got a lot of good people against good people. Got a lot of bad people taking advantage of the unrest. We have the sheriff's department, we have the police. These are essential and critical personnel. They're not being recognized in a way. They're being petitioned out as far as not getting a raise. And we also have the taxpayer who has been beaten up the last 6 years. They haven't seen a raise either, except they have seen a raise in their taxes. I remember last time we met, Mayor, I remember you saying that you would be more than happy to raise your taxes. You raise taxes on people that are the citizens of this city. They also are the engine that drives our economic capacity. You raise taxes, you harm productive people, you harm businesses, they will be damaged. That damages us. That damages the amount of revenue we take in. We have a cycle going. Every couple of years there's going to be taxes to be addressed as far as raising taxes. What we don't talk about is the raising and spending. Our population has dropped precipitously for the last 3 decades, while the bureaucracy in this city has grown. How is that possible? We have no fat in the sheriff's department. We have good return on our investment, also including the police department and the fire department. Now, we do have an enormous amount of fat in the school administration. That's where you stuck all the dead wood. Like I said before, 500% more people in the school administration than Virginia Beach. That's unacceptable. That's where the fat is. That is where you can cut without harming anyone. That is where you can save a lot of this pain, and you can save a lot of pain from our citizens, our neighbors, our homeowners, and our businesses. But you took that off the table. There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse for the damage and the harm that you're doing to our citizens. Now, there's been a change in the budget. The thing that was announced on March 31st is about $10 million less than what's being presented to the public today. And by state law, since there is a change and there's an increase in $10 million, you have to bring it back for a public hearing. And I would ask that this budget be held in abeyance until you do that and comply with state law. Thank you.
Good night, sir. Thank you very much.
Ms. Pat Simons.
Ms. Pat Simons.
Good evening again. By the way, my name is still Pat Simons. Even though your budget has changed so much, my name is still Pat Simons. In looking at your total budget, and I went online today and I pulled your agenda, and it showed a total of $669 million. The new agenda that you printed out is $667 million. Yeah, that's right. The public hearing, when it was published in the paper in the Currents on April 3rd, it showed a budget of $657 million. So depending on which one we're looking at here, 667, 669, original was 657, we're looking at a $10 or $12 million increase. Now you started out that 657 and you were going to raise the taxes 17 cents. So now you've increased the budget by 10 or 12 million, depending on which figure you're looking at, and you're going to raise them 3 cents. I'm not going to go into all the things about the fire and police, although my thoughts on that lie with everyone here, and I deeply appreciate those that voted against that. That reflected my feelings as well. I would like some ruling on whether or not, since you're increasing that budget, shouldn't you have another public hearing? I know when I was in the workshop, somebody asked the city attorney if you would have to have another public hearing, and she said no because the amount was less than the original. But we're looking at $10 to $12 million more than the original. So I would ask that you clarify that. You know, you really need to check on that and make sure exactly what is right. You know, this current financial condition of this city it's all happened under your leadership, Mayor, every bit of it. And you have never, ever looked at cutting spending. You always are willing to go and snatch money out of the rainy day fund or out of the general fund or move it here or move it there based on your priorities. But I don't believe that you have ever really considered the priorities of the total citizens. You have your own agenda, and we need one too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of council, there are no additional speakers to come before you this evening on this item.
Is there a motion to adopt?
Which one are we on?
Item I.
We're on I. Mr. Speaker. You got a speaker?
He's not registered.
He's not registered. He did not register for this item.
They've allowed him to go on.
All right, is there a motion to accept this? Approve?
Move for approval.
We have a motion and a second, and you're going to be voting electronically. This item is adopted 4-3. Item J, adoption of an ordinance approving the FY 2016 through 20 capital improvement program and appropriating $33,419,887 in the FY 2015-16 capital improvement fund, $150,000 in the FY 2015-16 Portsmouth Parking Authority capital improvement fund, and $22 million in the FY 2015-16 Public Utilities Capital Improvement Fund. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers. Our speaker is Mr. Mark Godalda-Kutrovsky.
Good evening one last time, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of council, and fellow citizens. The other night, the mayor announced the Portsmouth equivalent of President Kennedy's Man on the Moon by the end of the 1960s. Get the jail off the waterfront. But in reviewing the capital improvement budget for the upcoming fiscal year, I don't see any money for moving the jail. And it's going to be a substantial expense by anybody's estimate. I would say Sheriff Watson's estimate is probably the most optimistic one. But I've heard numbers over the years of anywhere from $50 to $100 million to build a new jail, and $60 million some years ago to build a new pod at the regional jail. So if this is really a serious endeavor, the way the space program was, show me the money. It should be right here, right now, if it's going to go anywhere. Because this is the 5-year capital improvement plan. It's not just fiscal year 2016. It goes through fiscal year 2020. But there's nothing in the out years either. And I think that that poor old jail structure, which according to Sheriff Watson, some years ago, at least 5 years ago, possibly 6 or 7, was being held together by chewing gum and baling wire. So it is a ticking time bomb, but it's a fiscal time bomb too, because we are already under a tremendous debt burden in the city, what with payments on the judicial complex, as previously mentioned, with payments on the pension obligation bonds, with payments on the Renaissance Hotel, with payments on the Entellus Pavilion, and with a seawall that keeps threatening to collapse. Thank goodness we're not in Nepal. So, if this is a serious commitment, we need to see some serious plan for funding the move. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Meeks?
Thank you, Mayor. I need to clear the air. My colleagues a second ago asked Brandon, the city manager, a question. And I want to ask the question again because I want him to clarify about these raises and bonuses. You said that we would have to raise taxes for a bonus. Is that correct? Couldn't it be used out of the fund balance because it's a one-time expenditure?
In that case, yes, you would not raise taxes if you paid for it out of fund balance. But I think I was trying to answer the question in such a way that you understand there is a cost associated with a bonus. It's not.
But a raise is also reoccurring, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so it is a difference. So I don't want the public to understand.
It's less and it's only one time. It doesn't have a compound.
I want them to understand that we could give a bonus without raising taxes. Isn't that possible?
If you did it out of fund balance, yes. Or some other source of revenue.
Like the incumbents maybe come from the school board. Possible?
Possible.
Thank you, Mr. Meeks. Go ahead.
Where am I now? Okay, that's Jay.
CIP.
We have no additional speakers on
Okay.
this item. We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 6-1. Item K, adoption of an ordinance approving a budget in the amount of $168,716,716 for the operation of the Portsmouth Public Schools during the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2015, and appropriating said funds by classification. Electronic roll call, and I have speakers.
Mr. Cherry.
Yeah, I just want to clip. Mr. Meeks just said you can use encumbrance from the school board to pay a bonus, and encumbrance means that money is encumbered to be spent. so no, you cannot use that for a bonus. Okay.
All right.
Encumbrance means the money is tied up.
Madam Clerk.
Our speaker is Ms. Pat Simons, and she's followed by Mr. Ron Evans.
Hello, I'm still Pat Simons. Even though the school board budget has switched here, I've got 3 different figures in front of me. But a curious thing about the encumbered funds, last Thursday the school board met and they did a resolution to council asking to remove $5.6 million from their instruction. Now, what would matter to the future of the children but instruction? They have, lo and behold, $5.6 million they want to take out of there. And they want to move it into several different things. So here we are. I go and look at a school board meeting a couple meetings ago, and one of the school board members said, wait a minute, we're at 75% of the school year and we've only spent 60% of our budget. Yeah. So already, this is the school board, the same one, all except for a couple of members that misappropriated $92 million, and here we are still at it. Now, if you took that $5.6 million and made them return that to the city, we would not be having a tax increase. We could have saved all this discussion on this budget. Every one of you would be up there with a less headache than you are right now. And I mean, right now you've got a lot of headaches because the citizens are upset. We've pretty much had it. I cannot believe, again, at this school board, you're jumping all over the sheriff and you refuse to look at that school board, which, by the way, it's my opinion that Mark Whitaker should recuse himself from any and every vote that has anything whatsoever to do with the schools. His wife sits on that board. She is a board member. And that smells to high heaven to me and to everyone else in this room. He has no right voting on anything to do with the schools. And when this whole budget issue started, it all started with Mr. Whitaker saying, we agreed not to touch the schools. And oh yeah, the 4 guys jump on it. We aren't going to touch the schools. And Mr. Cherry, I'm probably more disappointed in you than I am anybody else sitting up there. Because 2 years ago, you were all over that school budget. When that grand jury report came out and we found out how much money had been misappropriated, you jumped all over that. What made you change your mind? How come you don't see that now? What has turned your opinion around? You know, something is just not right. And I still say Mr. Whitaker does not need to vote on that budget, and I'd like to have the attorney's opinion on that. Thank you very much.
Good night. Mr. Cherry.
Yeah, I just want to address your last comment. Unlike you, Ms. Simons, I believe in second chances. And that was that school board. This school board and this current administration hasn't misappropriated any funds, okay? I was where I was because there was some misappropriation going on, and I stood against it. There hasn't been any. So you want me to hold this school board accountable for what the last one did? I'm not going to do that. And we have a brand new superintendent. He hasn't had a chance to do his job yet, and I'm not going to hinder him from doing that by cutting his budget before he gets one.
But this school board, you have a presentation dated February of 2014, which proves this school board continued to hide funds. This school board, Mr. Cherry, not some other
Ma'am, I
one.
don't know what your expertise is, but I doubt you can read the budget better than I can. Because I do it every day for 3 hours a day. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Ron Evans?
One more time, I'll make it short and sweet. Exactly how much does the school board need? The school board, which apparently now has 13 members. Whatever we give them will never be enough. What would the budget be next year? 200 million? By now, everyone should know you can't fix anything just by throwing money at it. If that were the case, we'd surely have a cure for cancer by now. They've had numerous violations, but with no consequences. And now you want to reward them? At the same time, the council majority hires an alleged auditor who after 2 years still hasn't produced one, at great cost to the taxpayers. I hear the constant cry of, it's for the children. But I ask you, what kind of message are we sending to children by these past actions or inactions? That it's all right to be secretive and squander money? That it's all right to fail or be incompetent? With that said, I have but one suggestion. Remove your blinders. Throw your rose-colored glasses in the trash. Well, the ones you should be wearing are the kind the late, great Ray Charles adorned. Oh, and by the way, none of you are Teflon. They got Capone, they got Gotti. Next.
Good night, Mr. Evans.
We have no additional speakers on this item.
Dr. Whitaker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say this because we have quite a few young folks who watch our council meetings. They've come up to me and told me so. And if they're listening and if their parents, I'm going to ask them to do a research project and go and look up the Southern Manifesto. You will find that that was a document that mostly Southern congressmen led by Strom Thurmond got together in 1956 and vowed to fight against integration and quality schools. And I just want them to realize that much of the comments that they're hearing tonight is not out of a sincerity for budgets, but it goes back to that type of context that has transcended centuries.
Madam Clerk. All right, next item.
Sir, y'all have to vote.
Okay, is
I
there a
need
motion to
and a
approve
second.
item K?
Move for approval.
Move for approval, is there a second?
Second.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 4-3.
Very good.
New business 15-198.
You have to remember, Mayor Whitaker has spoken.
And
Boards and commissions.
Vice Mayor?
Yes, sir. I have two motions to make tonight, sir, completely unrelated to one another. The first will be to remove William Devers from the Planning Commission.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Unless there's any other items, you're voting electronically.
Very good.
This item is adopted 6-0. 15-.
One more.
I'm sorry,
The second item is to appoint interim city manager Brandon Godfrey to the Hampton Roads Transportation Transit Authority as the alternate to Mayor Bright.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and you'll be voting electronically. This item is adopted 6-0.
And then we have one
Okay.
more.
Dr. Wood?
Right, the personnel motion that the board agreed to, council agreed to, and that is to place Bishop Curtis Edmonds as the chair of the Personnel Committee in place of Councilwoman Elizabeth Simmons.
Second.
Okay. You're voting electronically.
Okay.
This item is adopted 4-2. Okay. Is there anything else?
Any items submitted by council?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Simmons?
Yes, sir. I have quite a few items. I'd like to at least end this on some happy notes. Beginning this weekend, or actually beginning 2 weeks ago, but coming up this weekend, we have free movies on the lawn for families at the Intellos Pavilion just outside City Hall. At 7:30 p.m., you can bring a lawn chair or a blanket, and this Saturday, May 16th, is The Incredibles. The weekend, Saturday, May 23rd, we'll be in the midst of the Emoja Festival. So the following weekend, May 30th, we'll have the movie Brave at 7:30 p.m. on the lawn at Intellos Pavilion. Speaking of the Emoja Festival, Memorial Day weekend, next weekend, we will have the 25th Annual Emoja Festival on the grounds around the Intellos Pavilion, beginning that Friday night at 5:30 p.m., going till 11. Again on Saturday from noon to 7, and beginning at 7, we have a ticketed event with Peebo Bryson and Jasmine Sullivan and Kareem, who is from Portsmouth. And then on Sunday, we will have gospel music from 2 to 7 at the Emoja Festival. Of course, the festival is all free, except for the one ticketed concert on Saturday night. The elders for this year's festival are our very own former Councilwoman Marlene Randall and former First Citizen and coach Horace Savage, so that should always is a nice event. It's Memorial Day weekend, so that means we have the 131st Annual Memorial Day Parade, the oldest continuously operating Memorial Day Parade in the United States. This year it will be at 10 a.m. That's an earlier start than in past years. Begins on High Street in front of Norcom High School and heads east towards the waterfront, ending at Water Street. The reviewing stand, if you're interested in hearing the commentary on all the groups and bands and that kind of thing, is at High and Court Streets. And following the conclusion of the parade, we will have a very brief solemn ceremony commemorating our soldiers and veterans who were in Vietnam 50 years ago this year. So that's it, sir.
Oh, very good. Well done. Dr. Edmonds.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say a few things. We worked hard and diligently and long on trying to get the budget right as best as we could. And it's always interesting to hear some of the remarks that come back. I've never been classified as a horseman out of the apocalypse, even though I'm teaching out of the book of Revelation at this time. That was kind of low. But we live in Portsmouth, too, and we love Portsmouth. Born and bred here, most of us. Our children do watch this. And I wonder sometimes to myself, what do they get from what they hear? We know we can't do everything to please everybody. But I can assure you this council has done the best that they could do. We disagreed, but we didn't have disagreeable spirits. And we came together and we got the job done because we love one another. And for all of you that made your comments, we love you too. Thank you.
Well done. Councilman Moody.
Thank you, Mayor. I think someone who needs some recognition. He was thrown into the middle of the budget process unexpectedly, and that's our interim city manager, Brandon Godfrey. Nobody knew at the time that Mr. Rowe was going to be forced out, and then our budget director shortly after that. But Brandon stepped up to the plate, and I think he's done yeoman's work in bringing this together, especially with sitting across the table with 7 people that at times I don't think knew what they were doing, me included. I'm one of the 7. So Brandon, I'd like to just personally thank you. I think you've done a great job through this process, and I know you had your staff to help you. But feel free to recognize some of those as well if you'd like to call them out, if that's okay, Mayor.
I would. It was absolutely a team effort, and without Nita Mencia-Joseph, Deputy City Manager, and Judy Duffy, Interim CFO, and before her, Carol Swindell, and Rosalind Oglesby, our Assistant City Manager. We pulled together, and along with some other folks in the finance staff and the HR staff, we hope we got it to you in the form that you wanted it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Well done. Okay, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. 15-200, report on pending items, and we have none this evening. 15, I'm sorry.
Dr. Whitaker?
Yes, Mr. Godfrey, just an update at the next meeting on where we are with the disparity study.
Yes, sir. We're supposed to have the draft of the draft final document on May 29th. So hopefully there won't be anything that we need to tweak much after that, and then we'll get it right to you.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. All right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir. 15-201, non-agenda speakers. Our first speaker is Ms. Shelley Fons. She's followed by Ms. Geraldine Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. I'll make it really brief. Just quite frankly, I've been a little brokenhearted because I came here 25 years ago with my husband. He was a pastor, and our goal was to just love this city and the people in it. And I still have that same goal. He passed on a couple of years ago, but I just wanted to encourage y'all that there's a lot of people that are praying throughout this city for you as leaders, not in a bad way, but just because you have so many decisions to make, and you do have a huge responsibility. And just know that there's a lot of wonderful folks, just real positive. There's people over on High Street feeding folks. Been doing it for 5 years with no budget. There's people on London Boulevard. They open up on Wednesdays and let people come and get food. There's a gentleman who lives near City Park, and he's putting all his time in trying to help little kids fighting cancer have hope. There are so many wonderful people in this city. I mean, all y'all, and the policemen, the firemen, y'all. I admire anyone who would take leadership role and step up in the hours. I've only been coming to a few of these little meetings, and they are long, and y'all have a lot of work to do. And I have respect for that. I would just like to make one suggestion, and I'm kind of childlike in my faith. I'm a believer in the Lord, and I do believe in the power of prayer. I do believe there's a wonderful suggestion. It's not really a suggestion. The Lord gave us a wonderful promise in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 14. And he said simply, if we will humble ourselves and we will seek his face, then he will hear and he will heal our land. I think that's very simple. It's not easy to do. To implement, implementation's always hard. But I would just implore you, all of us in this room, to, as we leave here tonight, go to a quiet place, wherever that might be, and just humble yourself before the Lord, all of us. And let's see what the Lord could do. I believe God wants to use this city to do something amazing. It's a small little city, but there's so much good here. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to say a little prayer. I got up at 3:30 this morning. I've been praying about this all day, just like I just want to see good for Portsmouth. Lord Jesus, I thank you so much that you love us. I thank you, Lord, that all things are possible. I pray, Father, for every one of these council members, these leaders of our city. And Father, I just pray that you would help them have wisdom to know the right things to do. Help us as citizens, God. We need your help. We want to love one another. We want this to be a city that people are drawn to, regardless of what it costs to live here, because there's love here. There's kindness here. Help us, Lord, and do what only you can do. Heal our land. I pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Ms. Fons, would you please come back up? I want to just share with you that I think you're a very special person. You're a beautiful lady. She has invited the mayor and several other people to her house for prayer, visuals, meetings, and I think I've probably attended 2, maybe 3, and to be in your presence in your home and to see you bring the community together where you live and to see all of that spirit, it really does bring out the best in who we are as people, and not only in city of Portsmouth, but as a nation. And you have been that way since I've been in this office, and I want to thank you for what you do and how you go about doing it. God bless you. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Geraldine Johnson. Okay. Mr. Stephen Hogg.
My name is Stephen Robert Hogg. I'm a citizen of Portsmouth. Today I decided to actually write a speech, so it's entitled Civil Rights in Portsmouth. So here goes nothing. Surely human history has an appalling record of civil rights violations. The most prominent example is obviously slavery. Every ethnic group has been a perpetrator and victim of this crime. I don't mean to criticize any particular group of people. In fact, I don't even like bringing it up. We should not even judge people as groups, but only as individuals. So why point these things out? Since every race has committed these crimes and every race has been a victim, is it really a primarily racial issue? Should such offensive violations of civil rights be something that divides us among racial lines, or should be something that unites us together? If the main issue is not race, what is it? What is the common denominator? Here it is. Are you ready? It is almost always the result of corrupt government policy. There are some necessary and legitimate purposes of government, but what happens when the government violates our rights more than the ones they were instituted to protect against? I will be the first to admit that the worst civil rights violations in this country were committed against blacks. There are many examples like Jim Crow laws, poll taxes, ideologies like separate but equal, or more recently, the Contra cocaine controversy, where the Central Intelligence Agency facilitated the transportation of cocaine into Los Angeles and other areas with high African-American demographics so they could hype up their alleged war on drugs. Is there any wonder that the number of African-Americans in prison is disproportionately higher than their percentage of the population? Recently, there have been many shootings of African Americans in Portsmouth. Can I prove these were the result of police brutality? No. Only the witnesses of those events know the answer to that question. At the very least, I find it highly suspicious and concerning. But do we have to wait until people start dying to wake up to the fact that there are huge problems in Portsmouth? Are there not warning signs before it gets so extreme? No city goes from prosperous to unprosperous overnight. The excessive spending and redistribution of wealth has caused excessive taxation. Businesses are moving away and people are moving away or living in poverty. Even if a small amount of the tax money is going to the poor, you are taking more from them by driving business away and depriving them of economically prosperous jobs. The majority of the money is going to beef up local government salaries and frivolous spending. You pay some government officials hundreds of thousands of dollars while you take money from people making only $25,000. And has anyone read the City Code of Portsmouth? There's enough arbitrary laws in there to make your head spin. I took the liberty of preparing a list of my top 10 most arbitrary laws in Portsmouth. They can be found at my website, www.portsmouthpolitics.com. These are not separate issues as some may suggest. The law, economics, and civil rights are all interconnected. The economic policies and unjust laws that are implemented are like a catalyst for the violence. Then what should we do as a community? Should we vote our public officials out of office and replace them with leaders that will stand up for our legal, economic, and civil rights? Our leaders influence the government salaries with their excessive budget spending. Thus, they are buying votes of the government employees at the expense of the entrepreneurs and the poor. It's a typical example of socialism versus capitalism class warfare. Then how do we educate the population on the importance of civil rights? Should we riot like in Ferguson and Baltimore? This only turns public perception away from the cause. It justifies the government's actions in the eyes of the public. If it was police brutality, then their death was for nothing if we riot. If it is a bad economic policy, we get blamed instead of the government if we riot. If it is arbitrary laws, then we get blamed instead of the government if we riot. So what is the answer? There is a famous essay written by pre-Civil War abolitionist Henry David Thoreau. It is entitled Civil Disobedience. There are many examples of civil disobedience that have been very successful in this country and around the world. Rosa Parks, Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and of course, the most famous example of all, Jesus. If civil disobedience is to be successful, it has to be done the right way. It must be peaceful, organize, and incorporate as wide a range of people as possible. Let us pass out flyers. Let us have a rally in the park. Let us march around downtown Portsmouth. Let them arrest us for breaking arbitrary city codes. Let us all take out our camera cell phones and distribute the video to the world. Then watch the support for our cause grow. Let us set the example to other cities around the country how to positively affect change. Let us do something. Let us not stand by idly while our civil rights are violated. Where are the leaders? Where are the community organizers? Where is the patriotic fighting spirit? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hugg. Let me just share before you take your seat. You said something in there that was, I think, critical, and I've said this since the day I've been in this office, that everything we do in this city is connected. And we have people that want to come up and just their issues and talk about just their issues. And that is so unfortunate because we've got a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of land, a limited amount of things that we need to do to be able to make everybody here happy. And as Bishop Esmond just said, that's very difficult to do. But until we all come together, until we understand that all of these are our problems, all of these are our children, and this land is our land, we're never going to get there. We show up when we want to see things, or we call our friends when someone has said something to alienate them, and it's very unfortunate. And then these people will leave, and another group will show up the next week. And these things are all connected. And they start with our children, and they start within our homes, and they also include the government, our businesses, and people like you in the comments that you made. So thank you for that. Okay?
Thank you.
Mr. Barry Randall.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I'm all over the place tonight because I listened to the audience here, and I see that there's a double standard because, you know, they boo, and especially Mr. Curl throughout the different weeks, they boo, they make noise, and they're not escorted out of the building. It's real sad because on a spiritual note, I know most people will probably never take those that don't like me, and that's okay because I'm not looking to be liked. I have an assignment from God. But I realize that my assignment tonight is to address the 4 black members of council. I wouldn't even, Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't even really battle with the sheriff. I would just deal with him with your ink pen. It's real simple. We need to abide by the rule or the agreement with the Hampton Roads Regional Jail, period. There's no sense of having a jail standing in 2 empty courthouses. If at all possible, you need to send all the inmates to the regional. You don't have to answer to him. He don't answer to anybody, so don't answer to him. It's real simple. He can still be the sheriff over the circuit court and the general district court. Now, for this police officer, whoever his name was, you see he already left. But he comes up here and he tell you all that he's a master of this and they have so many masters. Well, if they are that many, you know, if they that well qualified, then how do you have 11 armed robberies in 30 days? How do you have we're not going to deal with the last 4 or 5 murders, to be fair. Let's deal with Emmanuel Terry, who was walking home from the basketball gymnasium February of 2014. Murder still unsolved. But yet and still, our police department, who gets up here and tell you what not to do, first of all, he need to recognize don't nobody check you but us. He was already out of line for coming at you like that. I would suggest that you look at New York and see how the police officers disrespected their mayor. Our police office is not like the sheriff's office. Our police office is directed by our city manager's office, and our city manager's office is directed by our city council. So what I'm asking, since we have police officers who can give out 300 trespassing charges, because if you go out Southside Gardens and if you go to a family member's house, you're not allowed to sit on the porch unless that family member's out there with you, because if they come by, if Sergeant Honeycutt and them come by and catch you out there, they give you a trespassing ticket. But they can't solve a murder. They can't protect businesses. We need an overhaul. Fire all the top police officers, call the governor's mansion, tell them to send you some National Guards until we get our police department under order. These individuals are trying to strong arm you all, and don't be surprised if they start to, you know, buck a little harder and you start seeing sirens in your rearview mirror or different things like this, because, and please don't go off, because I love white people. I don't like racist white people. When racist white people don't get their way, they will murder you. They will commit crime, because that's how they are. You have a Klan a meeting tomorrow talking about trying to recall you. First of all, let me let all of the citizens know. Bishop Edmonds, Dr. Mark Whitaker, Mayor Kenny Wright, Mr. Page Cherry, you all can recall them. That we can't control. But however, we will show up at the polls to put them back in the office. So you all can waste taxpayer dollars because you can't get your way and you're throwing a tantrum and you want to sit up here and call these 4 educated black men out of their name. They the ones with the degrees. Mr. Meeks walked away. Let me give you all a phone number. It's 1-844-FIGHT-PC, F-I-G-H-T, PC. Let Mr. Meeks know that he should be ashamed of himself, because the FBI wants to know how is it that you have city officials operating in businesses in the city but also sitting on council. I never bothered Mr. Meeks, but however, he wants to try to divide us by calling Dr. Whitaker Mayor Whitaker. Mayor Whitaker, Mr. Whitaker is fine with being a councilman. We know who our mayor is. We need to call the FBI and ask them how is it that Mr. Meeks is involved in the crowd business dealings and also a member of City Council.
Thank you, sir.
And Ms. Simmons, we respectfully ask for your resignation. And you, sir, will be recalled. You just have recall immunity.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Randy Bailey.
Yes, unfortunately, I'm back. I did 30 years in military service. I did 10 years in the Justice Department. The only shore duty I got in the military is they let me be the XO of the brig over off Hampton Boulevard for 3 years. In order to take that job, I had to go to school. There were 7 of them. And I learned how to be a jail administrator, the whole 9 yards, because the brig was considered a federal penitentiary. I had everybody from 3 days bread and water all the way up to the second-class petty officer from Philadelphia, who cut his roommate up and stuffed him in Tupperware bowls because the man snored. When I got out of the service, I went to work for Justice Department, specifically Bureau of Prisons. And during that entire time, I have to tell you that what you did to the Sheriff's Department was wrong. Because I understand everything he does, I understand his budget, the whole 9 yards. When you take your per diem and you give it to the regional jail,
Then you turn around and give them prisoners with per diem to it, they're getting paid twice. Seriously, the state already pays them, and then you're going to pay them again. You're wasting money. You have empty beds, yes, but somebody just suggested you send everybody over there. That's not going to work because they're going to have to build 2 more pods in order to service your entire jail population. They're not going to do that either. To cut their paychecks and response times and everything else for police, fire, emergency services, that's not right. Those are the guys that stand up for you. The biggest thing that made me mad this weekend was there was a young boy that was shot and killed. He's not going to graduate high school. Now, your schools are a mess. Straight up. When I came back up here, the VA sent me to college to do something with my time because my PTSD was so bad. They said I need something to do with my time. So I took some courses. I got a master's IT and a master's in business. And I met a young man who was an honor graduate from IC Norcom who told me that he was tutoring GED, but he had very little materials to work with. Then he told us he was using the USA Today newspaper. And we were proud of his initiative because he was trying to do something. And then when he told me that there were 51 states, because that's what's listed in the USA Today newspaper, and I asked him how come there are 50 stars on the flag, and he says because we won 50 major battles. And there were 13 stripes on the flag because we've been in 13 wars. And the reason why it was red, white, and blue is because the guy who designed it, Benjamin Franklin, those were his favorite colors. I began to question his honor student role at IC Norcom. You have a huge administrative section in the schools. There's your tax cut. There's where you can get your money at. You took away the take-home vehicles for police and everybody else, which that was kind of detrimental in my neighborhood because there was one parked on Mount Vernon. Of course, the crack dealer used to lean on it while he was doing his deals. He could tell his customers, you know, just come find the police car and I'll be right there. Now he can't do that because they've taken the car, so his customers are at a loss where to find him. And when I take one of the retired teachers to Home Emporium because she wants to get cabinets for her kitchen, because she's selling her house and moving to Chesapeake, we found her a home. And we're in the Home Emporium parking lot. Here's a Parks and Rec truck, pickup truck, loading kitchen cabinets. So we decided to follow him up Bainbridge Boulevard to South Norfolk where he delivered them. During the day on city time, you need to clean up your own house. You need to see what your employees are doing because there's a lot going on behind your back that's killing you. You're going to give them a raise, or you give them a raise to deliver kitchen cabinets. You really need to think about what you're doing. And yes, it's a conflict of interest. And yes, 9 people that I know of have called the FBI hotline. They're requesting an investigation. The other thing that you have in this city is your low tax base. Well, you got to remember you got 900 churches.
Good night,
Start
Mr.
taxing
Bailey.
their extra property, like 2 football field grass in front of it.
Ms. Angelia Allen.
Good evening, Mayor Wright, Vice Mayor Simmons, members of council. My name is Angelia Allen, and I live in the Parkview section of Portsmouth. My original plan to come up here tonight is to, number one, I'll stick with that, is to thank you for your hard work in trying to put together a budget with limited resources. Everyone who has spoken tonight has their own agenda of what's important to them and what is their passion. In this day and age, we all have to tighten our belts. I do include it. However, when we have people that stand up at this podium and are condescending to the people that we have elected to lead us, it's very discouraging. It's discouraging to me as a transplant to this city. It's discouraging to young people who are watching people stand here and basically be disrespectful, but then have an issue when you're disrespectful to them. It's a two-way street. I would like to see people come here with solutions, not just pointing out what the problems are in this city. If you have an issue with the school board, my question to you is, are you involved in the PTA? Are you going to the schools? Are you asking them what are they doing with the money? I have a problem when I sit in the room here, everybody who's had their opportunity to have their 5 minutes of fame up here and be disrespectful to each and every one of these council members, but then leave. So are you really here for the city, or are you just really here to get some FaceTime? Lastly, when we continue to handle our business in the press in disparaging manners, it doesn't help the city. I think everyone here is here because they have a love for this city. They are not the four horsemen. At some point, there are 6 people who vote the same. At some point, there's 7 people who vote the same. Sometimes there's 5 people who vote the same. They may not vote the same on what you want them to vote the same for. However, they're voting according to the facts that they're given and what their heart tells them to vote. So for citizens who feel like it's necessary to come up here and lambast these people, I'd like to see you run for office in 2016. I'll meet you at the polls. Thank you.
Mr. Ronald Weiss? He's gone. Okay. Our final speaker, Mr. Robert Turner.
Page him delete. You know what?
Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Godfrey. My name is Robert Turner. I live at 4313 Temple Drive. Most of you know me, and with exception of Mr. Whitaker. I would have been here sooner, but I just had recent knee replacement, and I've held off because of pain, plus all the racial tones. Mr. Whitaker came to council with a vendetta to get rid of Mr. Rowe and Mr. Wilson, and has completed that goal. Dr. Edmonds, I must say, I was surprised to see you go along with that. Mr. Rowe presented a budget to fund everything you all told him you wanted to do. Mr. Godfrey, if you would be so kind as to inform Mr. Rowe, we retirees thank him for saving our retirement. Ms. Simmons, I'd like to thank you for trying to fill the vacancies in public safety. I'd like to remind council, if lack of personnel on duty delays response time, you may see the savings go out the window with higher insurance costs. I know this is a thankless job, but as you quibble over a penny here and there, it's nothing compared to what citizens will lose in the value of their homes if this keeps up. Not to mention the job the city manager will have to keep the city afloat. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to vent. Again, I appreciate the hard work y'all do, but that's my opinion on some of the things I've viewed on the work sessions or what have you. Sorry I couldn't come.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Good night.
There are no additional speakers.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.